Hi, I'm Nat.
And I'm Guy. And we have a ton of Alberta independence coverage today. We've actually expanded our coverage to Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So if you ever need an update, this is the place to come. We always start off the show with the petition and the signatures to kind of hopefully push that over the threshold that they need of 177,000 signatures. It looks like there may be a little trouble there. We'll kind of talk about it. I think we're going to have no problem getting there in the end. That being said, let's get right into it.
So first of all, hello and thank you for being here. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. And also, we do read all your comments live. If you want your comment read live, please put a capital C in front of it because it helps us figure out which ones we should read and which ones we shouldn't.
Yeah, and we're going to start with all Alberta independence news, and there's actually a ton of it. I'm the one that gathers all the stories, and the reason I was able to expand the coverage is because there's just news coming out daily on this topic. And then we transition into Canadian news. The Canadian news today has a lot to do with Alberta independence, especially BC. What's going on in BC is absolutely insane. Private property rights are quickly disappearing. It seems like the federal government's trying to give away the entire city of Vancouver and the property rights away. I don't think the banks are going to extend mortgages. We'll get into that on the second half of the show. But let's start with the first story here. And like I said, we always start with the petition and the signatures and kind of give updates on that.
So from Carolina Sheik says, quote, "To my 7 followers in Edmonton, this is now a permanent location to add your signature under thousands of others to support the Alberta Independence Referendum, 91st Street and 22nd Avenue, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., 7 days a week."
Yeah, and it's not so much about the location here. It's more about the picture. And I think I have a few of them if you did grab them all. But you see how she's like literally sitting on the street outside of the Costco. She's not at the door front. There's not a lot of businesses that are supporting this or supporting petitioners. So these are, even though it's a high traffic area, all the traffic is going towards the front of the Costco, not where she's sitting. This is typical of a lot of these petition areas because businesses just aren't supporting this petition. I think there needs to be an effort to find businesses that will support this petition and allow people that are trying to get signatures be at their business if it is a high traffic area. All the petitioners that I am seeing right now are really not in high traffic areas unless they're on the side of the road, literally waving the petition, hoping somebody kind of pulls over. It's extremely dangerous to kind of be there for the petitioner and the person pulling over. We're going to show a video of that in a little bit, but let's continue on.
And also, once again, you can't really see it here, but you can go to stayfreealberta.com/how and where to sign to find all the locations and news updates as well. So that's always a good resource to have. We always have it linked down below as well.
And what's the name of the site again?
It's stayfreealberta.com.
Okay, stayfreealberta.com. If you've already signed, perfect. If you know somebody that wants to sign, that's where to go. The reason we're pushing this so hard at the beginning of every show is we need to get this over the threshold of 177,000 signatures. That guarantees that this will at least be on the referendum on October 19th. Once we get there, I think we'll back off of it a little bit. It's still going to be important, just not quite as important right now. It's absolutely crucial. There are multiple petitions I'm seeing in Alberta that are just failing because of the weather. They just can't get even 1/3 of the signatures needed. This is obviously has the most coverage, I would say, nationally and locally. So hopefully we can get it over the hump there.
Yes. Moving on, and as you were mentioning, it is in some cases dangerous or not as easy to continue to do the signatures. This is from the Critical Compass. Compass says, quote, "Middle fingers and honks, the truth about collecting." What?
Yeah, I'll set this up a little bit because it is a long clip. I do kind of want to show most of this clip, but they're standing on the side of the road. It's the dead of winter. This is actually good weather compared to what most petitioners are finding. Marty up north is outside all the time, and it seems like it's an absolute blizzard. It's the worst time of year to try to get signatures, yet the petition kind of goes forward. The two gentlemen here, I think it's great that it's a bit of a diverse bunch here. Well, let's kind of get into it.
Hey guys, Mike from the Critical Compass here. We're with Hadi and Trevor with Stay Free Alberta, and they're doing God's work this afternoon. They're out here in the freezing cold and the blowing snow, and they're collecting signatures outside of a Costco on the west side of the city.
310 in Alberta.
And Hadi, how's it been going so far today?
Oh, it's been amazing. We've been putting in the work, collecting signatures.
And pause it.
We're working hard.
It's extremely hard to get people to stop on an icy road. They're on a corner with a bunch of flags. Are they protesters? Are they people that are in support of Alberta independence? You don't really understand that they're getting signatures if you're driving by really quick. This is why we need to find high traffic areas where these petitioners can safely sit and people would just kind of walk by rather than drive by.
Tirelessly to free our nation and become sovereign.
Oh yeah. And have you been getting a good amount today?
Yes,
Yeah?
absolutely.
Good.
We've been getting people just driving here, pulling their car right in the driveway, wanting to sign. They're just done. They're done with Ottawa's rule. Past 120 years. Yeah.
And pause it one more time.
Trevor,
And as you can see there, he's not a white Christian nationalist. That's kind of the framing the national media is putting on this. It's only white Christian nationalists that are supporting this movement. Not at all. They're going to kind of talk about that in a little bit, but the petitioner themselves does not fit that profile the national media wants to frame this as.
you were telling me that you guys have, in addition to a few signatures, you guys have been unfortunately getting a few middle fingers and some
unpleasant gestures. Yep.
yeah.
For sure.
What would you say the ratio looks like today so far?
Oh, about half and half.
Yeah, hey? Okay, that's not actually as bad as I thought it might be.
Depends on how hard you push people, right? So
I suppose, yeah. You get a little bit of some good honks of support as well.
a few.
Yeah.
Could use a few more, right?
Just to keep the warmth in your belly, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And Hadi, I'm actually maybe fascinated a little bit with you because you are a similar nationality to me. We're both Lebanese by ancestry, and this movement oftentimes gets painted as like a
bad movement.
Yeah, like a racist or white nationalist
You know something?
movement.
It is what it is. We've seen how governments in abroad, like Lebanon, where you have 21 different political parties and the corruption abroad. Here you have two main different political parties, but it's very easy to capture corruption. I mean,
Yeah.
come on, people. Ottawa's rubbing us blind. I mean, what do you guys want? Agenda 2030?
Yeah.
15-minute cities?
Yeah.
Eating the bugs? Mark Carney? He's a globalist. He doesn't want the Western Albertans.
Yeah.
We need Alta. We're done. Ottawa got a plan accordingly. That's it. We're done.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
And it's funny you say that too, because the amount of immigrants that we see at these events who say the same thing, who have seen the same corruption in their countries, and the average Canadian just hasn't seen it yet.
No, and the thing is with the immigrants, hey, listen, I'm an immigrant and I'm fine. But the thing is, it's a difference between bringing in immigrants and invading a country with.
Yeah.
You have Danielle Smith saying she wants to
positive.
bring another 5 million.
And again, the main reason I am playing this clip is so people understand it's very hard for these petitioners to go door to door in rural areas. It's very hard in this weather. You can't get in most apartments to door knock because of the security. They're literally forced to stand on corners. We're going to show some other clips later. All these areas where these petitioners are being forced to kind of get these petitions, they're not allowed to go into malls or a highly foot trafficked area. You see this gentleman standing next to a stop sign. Obviously, somebody had hit that stop sign already. This isn't safe for the petitioner nor the people trying to stop the cars. I wish there were more businesses in high traffic areas that were in support of this that would allow these petitioners to kind of sit up in front of their stores.
More immigrants and we're a population of 4.7 million.
Yeah.
You know something? A picture speaks up. I used to like Danielle Smith.
Yeah.
But the thing is, a picture speaks up. When she goes takes photo ops with Mark Carney, that picture speaks 1,000 words, brother. I'm sick out here doing this because I want freedom for my family. I don't want to go down, another 365 times 4, 1,200 more days. And what are we going to be in communism?
Yeah.
Like by 2030 is just days away. We can't do this anymore. That's it. So it's now or never, right?
Yeah. And Trevor, what brings you personally out here today? What's brought you to this movement, maybe broader?
Yeah, I guess for me it was the last election where, I realized I don't know if Canada will ever swing conservative again. If they can swing, I think it's 30 points in a matter of, I think it was 2 months, 3 months.
Okay,
Yeah.
and we can leave it there. I think that gives a good image what petitioners are going through and why it's such a struggle. It's because of the time of year. That's why the APP, the Alberta Prosperity Movement, wants everybody that's getting these signatures to turn them in as they get them, if not on a daily basis, at minimum a weekly basis. I think they're still pretty far from the amount of signatures they actually need.
And while most commercial businesses like big chain stores will not let you go in, of course, most malls won't either. I'm sure there's some independent businesses in Alberta that would allow or would welcome at least a few days or certain hours people to set up shop there to get signatures so people aren't freezing in the cold or in dangerous situations.
Yeah, so if you live in Alberta, you have an independent business.
Or a restaurant or a pub or something.
Or you know somebody that does. I think that's what's kind of needed in the middle of winter right now to kind of help this thing along. In the summertime, I think it's going to be a lot easier.
Yes. But Jeff Rath also says that if you haven't signed the Alberta Independence Petition yet, please take your family out tomorrow and sign for freedom. And this was a few days ago, but the push is still needed, and people still need to not just think it's going to happen by itself, that it's fine, I'll just let other people go sign. If you're at all interested in it, at least go speak to the canvassers and to those that are setting up all of this.
Yeah, and we are going to get into Alberta independence news. Again, we like to start off the show with this because we really want to help this. This is the most critical part of the entire independence movement, because if this doesn't happen, nothing else can happen after this.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we'll talk a little bit about what happened to me on Saturday.
Yes, Saturday night.
Oh my God, we never go out to eat, so I was like, oh, we'll go for our romantic little dinner. We started walking, and I'm holding your hand, and I roll my ankle extremely hard. I almost break your hand because I'm trying not to fall, and I'm in so much pain.
Use me as a crutch.
Then I fall to the ground. You have to get the car, pick me up,
because we were just walking somewhere close to where we are, and then I had to go get the car. But his ankle is purple.
Yeah, my ankle's purple. I can't walk. I'm forced on. You had these mini crutches when you used to do ballet dancing and stuff. She's really short, so they're kids' crutches. I can barely use them. She also had a little mini cane. I'm trying to hobble around the house the best I can, but oh man, that was horrible.
Yes, so that is also why we haven't been able to do many other things this weekend.
Yeah.
We're
trying to set up interviews and people from Alberta, different content creators that are supporting the movement. We were actually supposed to do it that night, but I rolled my ankle really bad, and now I'm hobbling around.
But hopefully it's not broken.
Oh, I don't think it's broken because I can wiggle my toes. Okay, let's get right back into it here.
From Marty Up North, quote, people are afraid of backlash, doxing, or even job loss. This chills democracy and plays right into the government's hands. Stop being a coward. There is more of us than there are of them. And he says before that, why are so many Albertans scared to show their canvasser badge and number? You're playing right into their game. And it is an understandable concern because we have seen in the past the kind of disagreement often leads to violence with the insane people. But I think it is important to continue to speak up, because if more and more people hide, then they think that they're winning.
Yeah, and I would say good on Marty for putting his badge and his face there. He's already kind of a public figure. I think a lot of people that do have badges and are getting signatures, for the most part, these are the most fervent supporters. So I don't know how much fear there is there, but I think there is a lot of fear from business owners, people that own independent businesses. They definitely don't want to allow petitioners in front of their store or even in their store, because they think they might lose a lot of business by being called a traitor from people that do support nationalism rather than independence. And it's a shame. We do need those people right now, especially when I've been going through the amount of people trying to get signatures and the conditions they're having to face. Number one, with the weather, but number two, with the locations. A lot of times they're having to be set up in the middle of nowhere. They can't actually go where people are walking. They're trying to wave flags on the side of the road, hoping people realize they're gathering signatures. They're having to door knock. Their knuckles are starting to bleed because, I mean, it's so cold in Alberta right now. Mm-hmm.
And also with people that have regular jobs and are also afraid to speak up, at least there are people out there, like everybody we've profiled, ourselves, etc., that are saying something. And I think the more information there is, as I always say, the better. So if you are brave enough, I guess, to tweet something or talk at least amongst friends or family members, not in a just have the conversation, it doesn't have to turn into a debate, then that also helps a lot more than many people realize. Just starting the conversation, starting the debate, starting to analyze things amongst friends and families, and just talking to your friends and families, I think that also helps. So you don't need to become this big public figure, like, for example, Marty Up North has. You can do also you can do your own part just by speaking to people.
Yeah, and I do realize the federal government has bred fear into the Canadian public through the truckers' convoy, through canceling people's bank accounts, through the jibby jab, through the jibby jab passports. I mean, the number of things the federal government has done to instill fear in the general public, and especially with an issue of this, it's going to take a lot of bravery for not only people that are getting the canvasser's badge, but the people to actually sign the petition. So good on everybody that has been making the effort so far. But let's get into the regular independence news now. I think that was it for kind of canvassing.
Yes. So from Juno News, quote, reporter asks what needs to happen before the government would consider adding a provincial sales tax question to the October referendum. And Smith says, start a citizen initiative. If you think your fellow citizens are keen to have a vote, go out and get some signatures.
Okay, yeah, and I did do a pretty hard video on Danielle Smith because she did go over a budget. And my thesis is possibly she intentionally went over budget because I think that really hinders the Alberta independence movement. If people think Alberta isn't financially responsible enough to manage their own budget, they may not go out to the poll. It's obvious when you do the research. Alberta can stand on its own 2 feet financially, but when you do go over budget like that, it sends a message to the moderates or the people that are unsure.
But now they're trying to see if she's telling people to make a referendum about taxes.
What would be the process that needs to happen before the government would consider adding a provincial sales tax question to the October referendum or any future referendum?
Well, I know anyone who proposes a provincial sales tax says, why don't you just put it on a referendum? And I say to them, why don't you start a citizen initiative? If you think your fellow citizens are so keen to have a vote on this issue, we have a process for that, and there's time. Because what I've said is that any citizen-initiated petition that gets the requisite number of signatures will also be able to go on the October ballot. So I would say that all of those voices that are asking for it, then maybe they should put their boots where their mouth is and go out and try to get some signatures if they're so intent on it.
What would be the process that needs?
I've been looking at a lot of the petitions kind of going through. People are trying to get these citizens petitions for a lot of things for the October 19th ballot, and they're failing. Every single one I'm seeing is failing. The one that is having the most success is the Alberta Independence because they have so many canvassers. That being said, she's saying just put it on the ballot. Well, she just happened to put 9 questions on the ballot there wasn't petitions for, and she's muddied the waters now with the one question that actually really matters. How did she come to the conclusion that those 9 questions needed to be on, especially when they're contradicting the main question that's going to be on there, hopefully, which is about Alberta independence?
And it also lessens the importance of it if it is just lumped into that, plus any other citizen initiative that people could get signatures for. So it would just become more and more bloated.
Well, and the fact that
confusing.
And the fact that she's saying outright, if anything gets enough signatures, it's going to be on the October 19th ballot. It's a very good possibility nationalists will pump a lot of money into questions that would directly contradict the independence question.
And they already kind of tried it anyways.
Yeah. But I mean, what happens if you put something that's like directly contradicting? Do you want to stay part of Canada? And then put it in a very
muddled way,
yeah.
But here from Chris,
because she's already confirmed she's going to put any question on there that gets the amount of signatures.
this from Chris, Minister of Smart. But we will say, quote, act like we're losing every day. And I think it is a good suggestion because, again, the more signatures, the more momentum that can be built behind it, the better.
Well, I actually disagree with this. A lot of people think this is the actual case, and this goes back to canvassing. This was actually supposed to be one story up, but let's listen to what he has to say.
Hi there, friends. Hey, I'm seeing some messaging from accounts like Rise of Alberta asking people to step it up. And I'm seeing some people maybe taking this the wrong way and assuming that we don't have enough signatures or that we may be falling behind, which I do not believe is the case. I believe the messaging is to act like we are losing. Every day, act like we are losing. Don't think we have this in the bag. Don't think that other people can just do the hard work and collect the signatures and then we can take it easy. We need to act like it's the last 5 minutes of the third period and we're down by 2 goals and everything's on the line every single day. So don't mistake this messaging for we're not hitting our numbers. This is for motivational purposes. I'm about to go door knock to warm up to meet more people to door knock. I'm at the point where I've blown my knuckles up by knocking on so many doors. And on a good note, the good Lord gave me another hand and more knuckles.
Okay, you can leave it there. And although I do like that messaging because it's positive, I kind of disagree. When I'm looking at people that are gathering the petition, again, they're not in highly foot trafficked area. The weather's extremely bad. Anytime you're trying to do canvassing, which I know a lot of people that have in the past, when you go to rural areas, it's not very effective, especially in Alberta, because the houses are so far apart. You're only able to get so many in a day. So I think it's not so much they need to step it up. There's a lot of canvassers and they're all doing their part, but I think there's a lot of things kind of working against the movement right now. Number one being the weather. Number two being the general public and being able to get those high foot trafficked areas.
And also and we've seen it in votes time and time again, where people get complacent. They think it's in the bag and everything's going to work out. And then it doesn't, because a lot of people were like, well, I can wait for the next day, or I can go when it gets sunnier. I can go a million excuses, and it's just easier sometimes. And yes, right now it's really cold in Alberta, but sometimes it's easier to just get it done.
Yeah.
First.
Okay. And I would recommend this. If you live in Edmonton or Calgary, there are going to be some highly foot trafficked areas. Kind of figure out where you can best place yourself for a lot of foot traffic. Only in major cities are you going to be able to have that densely packed areas to get that many signatures. The question is, in Calgary, how much support is there for this? Calgary's starting to go the wrong direction because of the amount of implants from other provinces.
We did play this clip, and sorry to bring it again, because I know a lot of people said, I hate listening to him. But we did play this clip earlier on the video we released today. Go watch it. It's about the Alberta budget and why it might not be a good idea for the independence movement. But here Naheed Neshi says the 9.4 billion projected deficit in Alberta's law-breaking budget is a result of bad choices. But who made those bad choices, and who was forced to also do those bad choices?
Well, it's not so much. It's not so much it's bad choices. I agree with a lot of what he's saying here, even though I absolutely hate him. But she does need to be called out. The issue, she needed to be called out before she made the budget and placed it. I mean, when you're this over budget, in the grand scheme of things, it's not a big deal because Alberta has so much money. The big problem is it really undermines the Alberta independence vote, because moderates are going to say, why are we not on budget? Why are we going over budget? Are we not financially secure to stand on our own 2 feet?
They managed to waste
one more
the
second. And I think the federal government is going to use that as the independence vote gets closer. They're going to say Alberta can't even balance its own budget at this point.
During the boom. Oil production is at record highs. Oil royalties are almost at the record. Danielle Smith is dealing with 6 times the royalty revenue that Rachel Notley dealt with, and she still can't balance the budget. This government passed a law that makes this budget illegal. It's illegal in 2 ways. The deficit is twice what it's allowed to be under the government's own law, and you're not allowed to run more than 3 deficits in a row. And there's no path to balance in this budget. This government will double Alberta's debt in one government. In 4 years of Danielle Smith, we will double Alberta's debt.
Realistically, you would be in the same position as Premier, though, right? When it came to running deficits. Do you think there's any way you could put a budget out right now without running a deficit?
This is all the results of bad choices. These people are exceptionally bad with money and exceptionally bad with planning and budgeting. I've never seen a government before that doesn't really care about governing, that cares about scoring political points day after day, about their own political survival.
And you can
but not
leave
the
it there.
nuts
And I don't think that it's necessarily they're bad on budgeting. There is a lot of immigrants coming to Alberta, and she does want to increase the healthcare system. That being said, she knew that was going to be the case. And the main reason I don't like the fact that she's over budget is because it's the same year we're going to have an independence vote, and the mainstream media is going to try to frame this as Alberta is not financially secure as they're saying they are. And anybody that studied the issue knows that it's not Canada that's going to fall if Alberta, or it's Canada that's going to fall if Alberta separates, not Alberta. Alberta's very financially secure and very diverse in their economy as well. We did 2 videos on that last week.
Yeah, but it would be very easy for the mainstream media and for those opposing it to say, oh, well, but look, now they're going into a deficit and oil prices went down and who knows what's going to happen with the petrodollar, especially now after what happened this past weekend in Venezuela. There's so many excuses that they can place and doubts that they can place upon the minds of those that are still on the fence, or that are thinking, I mean, I might go vote, but maybe not. I might sign, but maybe it's not such a good idea because of what I'm hearing. So it just once again muddies the waters.
people need to be secure in the fact that once Alberta does gain its independence, it is financially secure. That is absolutely the case. I've been looking into it day after day because of the amount of videos that we're making, and I just don't know if that messaging is going to get out when Danielle Smith is over budget like this.
And also get out to the most important people, who are those that are on the fence, who might not be up on the issues as much as people that are fully supported.
Yeah, well, we're going to show a clip from Rebel News later, who did do an interview with somebody that was looking into the financials. He's an economist, I believe, and it was an absolutely fantastic interview. They clipped the interview probably 10 times, so there's 10 small clips if you don't want to watch the whole hour. But one interesting fact he was saying is, if Alberta gains its independence, the federal government is not going to be able to stand on its own 2 feet, and Canada very well may collapse. The pension alone, when Alberta separates, it takes a lot of that pension money back because it's the one that gave the money in the first place. And it's actually around 45% of Canada's pension fund is owned by Albertans. That's almost 50%. The rest of the Canadian pensioners just aren't going to get the level of pension that they were kind of promised if Alberta does separate. Oh, and one more thing about that pension. If they get that money back, they can claw it back from India and a lot of these other foreign governments that Mark Carney is investing the pension fund in, and invest it directly in Alberta and Alberta infrastructure. Bet on yourself.
And Canada has already invested a lot of that CPP money and not done so well on those investments, except they haven't come out and said it out loud. But when you look into the figures and the numbers, they have lost a lot of that money because of the bad investment choices that they have made with it.
Well, whether you do good or bad, you ultimately want to invest in yourself. Now, investing in Canada might not be the best idea, especially when Mark Carney's driving it off a cliff. That's why he knows, let's invest it in foreign governments. But I think Albertans would prefer to invest it in Alberta and bet on yourself there, because if you fail, it's all on you. And if you succeed, it's all on you as well. And I mean, if you invest, half of the pension fund would be billions and billions, tens of billions of dollars, if not $1 trillion. That would be a lot of money invested in Alberta itself. Mm-hmm. Okay.
But let's look at some dam investments that the government of Canada and Alberta has done in the past. From Ezra Levant, quote, "It's minus 15 degrees in southern Alberta. Everyone needs energy to keep warm. Too bad not a single one of these massive wind turbines is even spinning." Because, of course, it's not about renewable versus non-renewable. It's about reliable versus unreliable, especially when it's minus 15 and when these things can get frozen. And it might not be such a good idea to put them up in a province where everything freezes. Places where everything freezes.
And we're continuing our series profiling content creators and small media organizations. Tomorrow, we're going to profile Rebel News and Ezra Levant. He's actually from Alberta. A lot of people probably know Sheila Gunn Reid because she's from Alberta as well. She currently lives there. I think Ezra still lives in Ottawa. The big thing is Rebel News is crucially important because they have been standing up to the federal government on a consistent basis
for a while now,
and literally taking them to court if need be. Mm-hmm. If Mark Carney gets a majority government, he has censorship laws ready to come in. His number one target is going to be Rebel News. So it's going to be interesting kind of what happens there. I think if Alberta gains its independence, Rebel News will be moving its headquarters to Alberta. That would be my guess.
Oh, hi, everybody. Ezra Levant here. I'm actually just pulled over at the side of the highway driving between Medicine Hat and Lethbridge, Alberta. So I'm in the countryside. It's about minus 15. And I saw something I wanted to show you. I don't know if you can see. I counted behind me are about 30 massive wind turbines, about 30 of them. If you look way back there, you can see some more. And not one of them is spinning. There's not even a breeze. I mean, if there was, it would be even colder than it is. It's minus 15. Everyone needs electricity to keep their houses warm, to cook, to live. And green power is, as they say in these parts, as useless as tits on a bull. For Rebel News, I'm Ezra Levant.
And it's still insane to me that they continue to push these things. And for example, in Canada, I don't know for how long you haven't been able to build, what are those called? chimney. To have a chimney with actual wood, which, I mean, you could go source yourself. They made that completely illegal. And many other forms of staying warm in a place where those kinds of policies just don't work.
Well, those policies aren't even the most egregious. The most egregious is how Mark Carney's trying to set up the federal economy with carbon credits and all kinds of other green scams. The study just recently came out. Canada actually does more to save the environment and take carbon out of the air naturally because it has more trees than almost any other country. So it's actually a carbon benefit to the environment. Yet they're saying they have to meet their carbon quotas. They naturally meet their carbon quotas. So the fact that they're trying to sell this massive lie and then put all kinds of restrictions on Alberta oil and Alberta natural resources absolutely hinders everything kind of the Alberta economy is about.
And on the people, the carbon taxes that also affect the people and food prices and everything else that they don't come out right and say that it's going to affect.
Yeah.
While countries like China and India can continue to pollute as much as they can, but make sure that the other countries stay stifled.
Yeah, the more I learn about the Alberta economy and what it will do if it does separate, it will be one of the strongest democratic economies in the world. I didn't know that at first. When I first started researching, I'm like, it should be able to stand on its own, will it? And then I do more and more research, and I'm more than pretty impressed with the Alberta economy. If you compare it to other similar economies, I mean, it should blow the doors off of how much it actually makes. It should be a multi-trillion-dollar economy, I would think. It's Canada putting a lot of these restrictions on Alberta. And even with those restrictions, Alberta is extremely successful.
And is holding the rest of Canada up, which is falling down a tube. Speaking about economy, Alberta Separation says, quote, Carney says one thing, this is reality, and this is a 2025 fourth quarter G7 real GDP annualized growth rates. Of course, the US at 1.4, but Canada is the only one that is a minus 0.6.
Yeah, and this is important.
Japan's not doing that good either.
This is important to just keep bringing up. I know Mark Carney's not going to run on the economy because the economy's not doing well. He's not going to run on he's bringing inflation down because food inflation is the highest of any G7 country. Anything economically he can run on, he's failing on. What he's going to run on is Alberta independence versus nationalists, and he's going to try to turn them against each other. And then he's going to run on TDS, which is Trump derangement syndrome. And I think that's going to be enough to get a majority, and I hate to say it. And if he does get a majority, the question is, what length is he willing to go to stop the Alberta independence vote or not recognize it?
Especially when, I will say, he gets a majority.
Well, and it looks like the snap election is going to come before the Alberta independence election. So
should we read some comments?
Oh yeah, I forgot. I was getting distracted there.
Powering through.
My foot's hurting a little bit. So
hello, Tal. Thank you for being here. Now I'm starting to, because in Spanish, I do a live in Spanish. I recognize everybody that always sends messages. Now I'm recognizing them here too. So hello, Tal. Thank you for being here. It says, my tests seem to indicate that it doesn't like emojis. And we do, for anybody that's new here, we do have emojis and links blocked as comments just to avoid spam. We used to get a lot of spam with emojis. So sorry if you really like emojis, but it's just better for the chat and being able to manage all the comments. Also on our videos, emojis and links are blocked.
Oh, yeah.
But it's the only thing we block. We are 100% free speech, and we don't delete negative comments either.
And also only subscribers can leave a message because we were getting so much spam, even when nobody was watching. The amount of spam was absolutely insane.
Especially when we were talking about Candace Owens, funnily enough. So,
oh, God, I watched another episode of her, and man, it was craziness.
Stop watching her. We were reporting a lot on the Candace Owens, Erica Kirk thing, and Charlie Kirk as well.
Yeah, we were on different sides, so I thought it was good for the debate, but eventually I had to come over to her and
To the reason side, the side of reason.
Yeah.
Yes. Tal says, drat, I love my emojis. Sorry. Lady Wolf says, hold on. There we go. Lady Wolf says, you guys are in Mexico, right? You might want to be on the ground here in Alberta. It's insanity in most places. And again, we would love to go eventually.
Yeah,
soon.
once it gets,
not that.
Hopefully once it gets closer. And I don't think there's limited censorship right now on the subject, obviously on videos that we're posting on social media, stuff like that. I think X is fairly open, but I'm expecting mass censorship from Mark Carney at a certain point, especially after watching the interview that Rebel News did with that economist who was highly involved in the Brexit separation and is really looking into Canada's vulnerabilities. Canada would literally fall if Calgary gets its independence. And
Alberta.
Oh, sorry, Alberta gets its
Calgary.
Alberta gets its independence. I mean, once they really wake up to that on the federal level, they're not gonna be willing to negotiate with Albertans. So I think they're going to really try to play the authoritarian and do something like they did during the truckers' convoy and straight up bring in mass censorship and cancel people's bank accounts.
So in a way, we might be more useful in Mexico. But once it gets closer to the vote, etc., we might probably go report on it over there as well and show support over there.
Oh, definitely.
But for now, to get information out, I think it's an even better. We have a better chance to reach more people being not within Canada's borders.
Yeah, having assets outside of the country that are highly attached to the Alberta independence movement because of what the Canadian government did to us when we lived in BC. I mean, I feel absolutely betrayed by the Canadian government and a lot of the Canadian people that are just voting for this time and time again. They don't know how to vote for common sense, and it's just upsetting. That's why it's so inspiring to see Alberta, which is the one place in Canada that hopefully has enough common sense to actually stand up for itself. And at this point, it looks like they will.
And back during the truckers' convoy, a lot of the information was also being censored and not being able to reach most Canadians. And a lot of U.S. independent news sources and journalists were the ones that were putting that information out. Now it's a bit of a different context because now we have X, but that's the only social media platform that has fully chosen to be, and RUMBLE, that have fully chosen to stop listening to what governments start telling them to do.
Well, we do
almost.
The show also covers geopolitics on Tuesdays, and before we really went deep into Alberta independence, that's what we covered every day. So I do know how the EU's working, the UK, Australia, and they are literally arresting tens of thousands of people for memes and speaking up for truthful facts online. And if Mark Carney gets a majority government, he has the 3 censorship bills just ready to come into Canada. And I think a lot of content creators are going to find themselves in a bad position that are living inside the country. So having content creators that actually live outside of the country will end up being a huge benefit. And because these are American social media companies, they may not bring as much censorship as we think to this issue. So Mark Carney may address it in a different way, going directly after content creators.
Within the country.
Yeah.
And Tal says, howdy again, you twos. And Tal also says, I have also had some negative reactions canvassing. This past weekend, the anti-referendum rhetoric is ramping up and is only going to get worse. And it's only going to be getting worse. And exactly. And also, if you're a canvasser, please take care and also record any incidents. Not that always the police will be on your side, unfortunately. We've seen it during other movements and with other people doing several different things. I'm thinking of Billboard Chris, for example, who got blamed for just being there and provoking the others to attack him, which is insane. Again, that was in Vancouver, but who says they might not start trying to play those tricks too? So being fully aware of your surroundings, and also if you're able to record the negative interactions, sometimes it dissuades or at least gives you some backup to show what happened.
Yeah, we're still a long time out. We don't even have the initial 177,000 signatures. Once we get those 177,000 signatures, the federal government is going to start dropping the absolute hammer on people, and the rhetoric is going to build up. I think they're going to try to flood Alberta with immigrants. They're going to try to flood it with protesters. They're going to do everything they can. After watching that Rebel News interview with that economist, I was really, without a shadow of a doubt, Canada is going to fall if Alberta separates, and Alberta should have one of the strongest economies in the world after that. What Canada should be doing is coming to the negotiating table now, saying, what do we need to do to keep you? They're doing the exact opposite, and I think they're going to continue with this rhetoric.
But even if they came to the table to negotiate, I would still say separate.
No,
you know what's going to happen. You have to be independent.
It's been almost 100 years. They've been treating Alberta like a doormat. At the founding of the country, the way the country was just set up, it was set up for Eastern elites to run the country and not have any of the West Coast provinces have a say in the future of the country.
And Tal says, but my stature and appearance dissuades physical hostility, though, even at my age. Well, that's good.
Well, we did have a super chat, so why don't you bump that one up, and then we'll go back to the other ones.
And thank you so much to Terrence McClary for the sorry, I can't see. my screen is really small numbers. For the $5 super chat, thank you so much.
And a $5 super chat is actually a lot because we live in Mexico and pesos are worth a lot less than Canadian dollars. So thank you.
Well, it's now equivalating with
It's starting to.
but I mean, they're completely messing up the economy here too, surprisingly.
Well, a lot of it actually has to do with the US dollar, why the Canadian dollar is able to maintain itself and the Mexican peso is able to come up. Trump is trying to actually lower the dollar for manufacturing purposes in the long run. And a lot of people don't know that.
And says or asks, Guy, have you read the Value of Freedom document from the Alberta Prosperity Project?
No, I haven't read it yet. Maybe take a screenshot of that, so then I'll remember to read it afterwards. Because I've been doing every day I do a ton of research, then we have to make videos. I was actually watching an interview with Marty up north, and he says, well, I use X because I can do something in 12 seconds, and it's done. I used to do YouTube, but it takes hours to make one piece of content, and it really does. There's only 2 of us doing it. It seems like there's
And
only,
we have 2 channels.
Yeah, and we have a Spanish channel. There's only so many hours in the day.
Yes. And the Spanish channel I've had to kind of abandon a little bit just to fully get doing stuff here, and then I'm going to have to figure out a way to do both.
Well, and we do really appreciate all the support from the people from Alberta, and that's why we've kept expanding our coverage. Now we're doing Monday, Wednesday, and Friday all about Alberta independence on our lives, and our video sections pretty much all about that. And it's been because of the level of support that has allowed us to kind of expand our coverage.
And Tal says, FYI, there's absolutely no way that anyone would know any sort of current tally of signatures. I don't think that Elections Alberta would have that data until the petition closes.
No, but I think Jeff Rath might have a good idea. And a lot of the tweets that's coming out from him is saying, please get the signatures in, keep getting signatures. When he used to make a lot of tweets that we're going to get a million signatures, no problem. We have 50,000 canvassers. It's the middle of winter. There's not a lot of support from business owners. We're not in high traffic areas. So I think it's a little bit harder than we thought it was going to be. As the weather warms up, it should get easier, but those signatures have to be submitted by a certain date. So we're not going to have too much warm weather to actually gather those signatures.
And then,
but the good news is if you're able to get those 177,000 signatures in this kind of weather with these kind of conditions in those kind of low traffic areas, I'm very, very confident that you're going to win your independence.
And it's always a bit better to underestimate than overestimate how many you have. And we know that shenanigans might be played by many different sources. So
okay, keep reading the comments. We're going to get right back into stories when I get back from the restroom. I have
you don't have to say that.
Well, I have a sprained foot, which I sprained on Saturday.
It's going to take you a while.
So it's going to take me a while to walk there and back.
Hobble over there. I'll continue reading all your comments, which is what I really like to do. I usually do a lot of that in my Spanish channel, and I get carried off course. These lives are a lot more structured than when I talk by myself. Tal also says, I'm a second Dan black belt. The training and the look and shift in standing stance does kind of radiate to troublemakers. And Lady Wolf says it was only minus 16 yesterday and it's warmer today. Hopefully it does continue to get warmer. I was seeing also that in BC, they finally decided to not go with the daylight savings time or stay within the daylight savings time. Here, we decided to do that in Mexico, and it's a mess with all the time changes. So let's see how they do. But hopefully it does get warmer and spring starts springing up. Hold on. And, hold on, because Tal is answering an important thing that someone left. Lynn says, please do not show canvassers' badge numbers, but then Tal says you have to Lynn, if you're asked while petitioning to show your badge number. If you're a canvasser, besides it's just a number, there is no name attached to it other than your scrawled signature.
Well, and then what did they say about the second Dan black belt?
Oh, Tal says that he's a second Dan black belt, and that plus the stance dissuades anybody from trying to do anything. But I will also continue with more advice that Tal is giving, saying my advice to canvassers has been to bring somebody along with you while petitioning, even if they're not a fellow petitioner. And yes, working in pairs is always safer.
And have a camera. If you have a little 360 camera, that works best. When we used to work with Billboard Chris, that's what he used to have, so it can watch your front and your back. Oh my God.
Do you want me to do it? Oh, no, because then nobody will be able to see anything.
I don't know if this is charged.
Rosie said, yes, bring company for safety. Even the building we got, nobody works alone. And yes, safety in numbers as well. And also that way somebody can maybe film if anything happens or anybody approaches you with hostilities, then you have it on video too. Tal says, I'm in Red Deer and I've reached out to a couple of people I found on X about teaming up to canvass here or near communities. And again, I think there are more... I think there are a lot more people that are... No. Oh, okay. There we go. hobble over. I think there are a lot more people that would be willing to team up, and maybe that also becomes more encouraging for those that were thinking of becoming canvassers but don't want to do it alone. If there's more of a team aspect to it, it's
not only a team. What I was going to say is I've been seeing where a lot of these canvassers are set up and they're like literally in front of abandoned warehouses on the side of the road. If there's small businesses that maybe don't necessarily want to let canvassers sit up in front of the store, but maybe they're a donut shop and they can donate donuts and coffee to the canvassers, then the canvassers can give out free donuts and coffee, which may persuade people to stop, even if they're not going to sign the petition. At least it starts a conversation.
Yeah.
And you really need to start these conversations, especially with the moderates and stuff like this. So whatever small businesses can do or can donate to these canvassers, they are really doing a hero's job right now.
And Rosie says, in Alberta, we had 2 terrible premiers in a row. Smith has to catch up with our services, which were behind before.
Yeah, I can understand that. My big problem is overspending on the same year that there's going to be an independence vote. And I know how the propaganda is going to be used against Albertans and the independence movement as the vote comes closer.
To be able to say, well, they can't even manage the budget now, what says that they can survive if they become independent?
Well, and the truth is the federal government's taking all kinds of money from Calgary, and they wouldn't be over budget or Alberta if that money wasn't taken in the first place. I don't know why I keep saying Calgary. Okay, that's
Tal
good.
says,
I'll read one more comment and then we'll go back to stories.
Tal says, FFS, that's how I'm going to have to say it, after what Neshit did to Calgary. He has a lot of nerve talking about managing or balancing the budget.
How he ever got elected, I have absolutely no clue. Like, it's absolutely insane.
It is insane.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say...
And that now he's criticizing the same kind of policies he wanted to bring in and saying, oh, well, it's their fault. No, it's also the federal government fault for pushing that through to and almost forcing the provincial government to go along with them.
Well, I also think there's
immigration.
A large implant population in Calgary and a large female population in Calgary as well. It looks like they're going to try to replace him with another NDP person that's a female. So it's going to be interesting what kind of happens there. That being said, what I was going to say, for people, make sure you have some kind of camera with you, whether it's on your body or otherwise. There's 2 reasons. Number one, so you can report it. But I'm going to tell you, the national media is going to try to start framing this thing in all kinds of ways that it's not. So having body cam footage of nationalists and people that are coming up to the stand, whether they flip your table or flip you off or give some kind of crazy words, really allows the Alberta independence movement to kind of frame it as they will, rather than allowing the national media to frame it.
And to tell the truth, and in some cases even get ahead of the national media reporting on certain incidents that may happen, hopefully not, but on certain incidents that may happen, so they can't fully frame that narrative as they want to.
Well, and I will say, when we used to work with Billboard Chris, he used to film everything, and he got a huge profile every time there was an incident. So not necessarily that it's a good thing,
no.
But if you already have the footage and the incident kind of happened, use it to the maximum capacity, and that's posted
to show how insane people can be.
Posted on social media. Yeah. This is going to help a lot of moderates come over to the independent side, because it's going to make us look like we're the sane side. And good on that one individual for being a second Dan black belt. Yes. I used to teach Brazilian jiu-jitsu, but now I got a bad back.
And now you can't even walk. So, but you're still going.
Yeah, I started going again. The Canadian healthcare system couldn't figure out what was wrong with my back.
Another reason we left.
For 10 years. I get to Mexico. I see a doctor twice. The first time they say, I think it's this, go to this specialist. The specialist diagnosed me, gives me medication. And I'm not 100%, but I'm doing jiu-jitsu again. And I wasn't barely able to walk at one point. Okay, let's get back into the stories, and then we'll go back to comments in a little bit.
Just trying to figure out where you wanted to go. From Western Standard, and Mario North says, quote, Alberta independence leader threatened with a BULLET. Not sure if I can say that on YouTube, but with a weapon, I guess.
I saw the story yesterday of Mitch Sylvester being threatened indirectly in his store. Somebody walked into Mitch's store and apparently put a bullet on the counter and said, this bullet's for you. Now, Mitch wasn't there, but it scared his clerk. And then, there was a search for the individual, and then some people claimed to know who it was. And then there was some backpedaling, and people tried to make it sound like, oh, it was a misunderstanding. It wasn't a bullet. It was a pen shaped like a bullet, all sorts of things like that. I always think that there's two sides to the story, but based on what I've seen lately, I'm fully on board. I absolutely believe Mitch when he says somebody put a bullet on the counter and uttered those words. It's on video, and I think somebody's trying to backpedal after the fact, claiming, "Oh, it was just a joke." That's no joke, folks. That's a genuine threat. I saw the story yesterday.
Yeah, and again, this may be another reason why small independent businesses don't want to outrightly help the independence movement, because they're scared of incidents like this. And I'm not going to be surprised if more of these shenanigans continue to happen.
Yeah, and I think it's going to continue to escalate as people see the movement itself gain momentum. Well, the movement against it, unfortunately, will also gain momentum. And we also know there's a lot of NGOs that get protesters fully paid to go do crazy things. We're seeing it in the US right now with what happened with Iran.
We're talking trillions of dollars here. If you think the federal government's going to let trillions of dollars just walk away and the amount of political power that Alberta actually gives the federal government, Alberta walks away. The federal government has very little to negotiate with the US for tariffs on. A lot of what the US wants lies in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and BC. And the truth of the matter is, I think the US would rather deal with Alberta and Saskatchewan and can find everything they kind of need there. What they need from Canada are natural resources so they can build the finished products. Okay.
Sorry.
That was it.
But also from Alberta 51st.
Oh, one more thing I was going to say, actually.
And I'm not for Alberta joining the US, but
and that was Marty up north. We did try to contact Marty up north. Hopefully we can set up an interview with him. I know he has trouble going through his messages on X because he said a lot of people message him. So we'll message you again, Marty. But if you are watching the live by any chance, look through your messages. We'll send another one.
We'll continue to try to set up, not just with Marty, but with a lot of the creators we've been profiling. We would love to interview them and also delve a bit deeper into how they see it, their motivations, stories, etc.
Yeah, and thanks for Marty to actually watching our video we did on him and then reaching out to us.
And also to
Clyde Do Something was great.
Do Something, and also to, hold on.
The Fringe.
Yes, to everybody that has watched us profile them. We are doing it so people, and so there's a bit bigger kind of network and sources of information, because we might not get all the information. They might not get everything that happens in a day or in a few days. So just having those resources.
Well, and PJ the Belt as well.
PJ the Belt.
And what I want to say is with these censorship laws primed and ready to come in Canada, if Mark Carney does do that and then goes directly after content creators living in Canada, it's nice to have this network because we live outside of Canada now. We can have these content creators funnel us videos, funnel us information, so then we can post it from outside the country and won't have the same kind of liability they might. So it's good to have a decentralized network of people that can kind of rely on each other. And if you're not subscribed to any of the content creators we profiled, please do so. It really does help the movement overall. Right now, the federal government's not putting the boot down like I think they're going to do in a few months. Okay, let's continue on here.
From Alberta 51st Project. Again, I think Alberta should be its own independent country, but says, quote, another reason why Canada and Alberta are not the same country and should not share common government nor police forces.
We know the best defense for most people is to comply, as you've just heard, a number of safety recommendations. It sometimes can fall on deaf ears when members feel like they have to take matters into their own hands. And the only thing I'd say is, if we are going to rely on our community members to take matters into their own hands to solve this problem, we have all failed our community.
As investigators have determined that the woman was acting in self-defense, Ahmad's death has been deemed not a non-culpable homicide, and no charges will be laid in the incidents. An incident of this nature is extremely rare and deeply unsettling for the victim, her family, and all Calgarians. The victim's actions undoubtedly saved her life, and our thoughts are with her as she continues to recover.
Yeah, and this goes right into gun rights as well, or firearms rights as well, things like this. The federal government is just a different culture. They're going in a different direction. Alberta really has the right first principles and kind of understands if you're inside your home, you should 100% be able to protect yourself by any means necessary. We used to live in BC. I mean, there was a guy going into a house with a crossbow and the other guy protected himself, and the guy who protected himself was charged. There was another incident. I think, I don't know if it was BC or on the East Coast, but a guy was living with his mother. There's 5 people assaulting his mother. I think he got his weapon and he was able to get them out of the house, but then he was charged. It's absolutely insane what's going on in the majority of Canada. And this is just another cultural reason Alberta needs to separate.
And common sense reason.
At this point, after doing all the economic research, it's obvious Alberta is not only going to be able to stand on its own, but thrive on its own. But these cultural issues just add more fodder to the fire, I think.
And I mean, you could go into everything that Canada has continued to do wrong and the rights that they've continued to strip while saying, we're just protecting human rights and making everybody more equal. Well, they're stripping away parental rights. They're stripping away freedom of speech. They're stripping away all these things that continue to be important to a lot of the Albertans that want to leave, also because they know that's no longer a given within Canada, which is insane.
Stripping away bodily autonomy, freedom of movement. I mean, the Supreme Court just came in and said they had overstepped their boundaries, but it's 2 different cultures at this point. It's obvious.
2 different countries.
Saskatchewan and Alberta are just cut from a different cloth, and that's not going to always be the case. If Alberta doesn't gain its independence, it's going to be flooded with immigrants, and that culture is going to be cut down at the knees. It's time to stand up now while Alberta still has a chance. Okay, we'll do 2 more stories, and then we'll go back to comments.
So from Alberta 5-1 says, now tell us why Alberta should stay in Canada again, please. Between 1988 and 2023, Canada spent nearly $544 billion on foreign oil imports, mainly into the East from a bunch of different countries too.
This is freaking insane, and this is continuing to happen. We've covered the Australian story. They're bringing LNG all the way over from Australia to Eastern Canada rather than get it from Alberta or Quebec. Quebec has a lot of LNG as well. Why? What's Mark Carney's company called again?
Brookfield Asset Management.
Brookfield is directly connected to that LNG company in Australia, and that's why they're buying it from over there. These politicians and Mark Carney are lining their own pockets. Even if it costs more to buy from Alberta or somewhere else in Canada, it has an added on benefit, even if you're paying more to buy it from your own country.
Now let's listen to Keith Wilson also explain the rigged system and why the compromises will never be done, even if Alberta continues to try to demand as a province from the federal government. The federal government doesn't want to give up its own power. Of course it doesn't. From Rise of Alberta, quote, the system is rigged. To fix it, we would need Ontario and Quebec to amend the Constitution. Why would they ever vote to reduce their own power? And that's the thing. Once a government gains power, no matter what stripes it has, it will never give it up.
Yeah, and as of right now, Keith Wilson really has my vote to be the president of Alberta if it becomes an independent nation. I'm open to suggestions if there's anybody better, but as of right now, this is the person that I trust the most, and I think he's the best educated, not just on the subjects of Alberta independence, but how to build a country going forward.
The structure is just against us. And the structure is that we all know the elections are decided in Quebec and Ontario. They drive the agenda. It doesn't matter what we think. And the only way to change that structure would be to convince the people in Quebec and Ontario to change the Constitution to give us more power. But they don't like us and they don't agree with us. So they're never going to agree with that. So I'm kind of feel like we're in a bad marriage and we can go to counseling all we want. We're not going to reconcile. And so I think we should put our energies into becoming a free and independent country and not in trying to convince Ottawa and Ontario and Quebec that there's a way forward with us together with them, because I don't think there is.
And that's it, trying to get some sort of deal from the federal government, or trying to get Ontario and Quebec to remove powers from themselves is not going to happen. They don't want to do that.
No, and I didn't know much about the Buffalo Party, which is now the Alberta Republican Party, before we did a video. We're going to do a video later this week on it, maybe post it this week or next week. But I think the idea of having a separatist party that is in Saskatchewan, Alberta, and possibly even BC, really to claw back power if this Alberta independence movement for some reason doesn't succeed. We're going to really need to focus on how to get power and to make this a fair electoral system, because Canada is completely rigged at this point. Okay, let's go into a few questions.
I was trying to or comments. I was trying to find where we left off. Tal says, Smith et al., or the UCP, has absolutely no excuse for this current budget. And interestingly, our video about the budget didn't do so well, so go watch it.
Yeah, that was our worst video that we did. And I know there's a lot of support for Danielle Smith, and I used to support Danielle Smith immensely. But since she muddied the water with the questions and then put out this budget on the same year that the independence question is going to be put on the ballot, it's really soured me on her quite a bit. I'm willing to be brought back into the Smith camp if she'll support Alberta independence a bit more.
Rosie says, Rebel News wound up a great talking tour with 3 headline speakers. It was Tamara Lich, Corey Morgan, and Sheila Gunn-Reith. Can't remember the last one, all sold out.
Oh,
and they're starting
fantastic to hear. And tomorrow we are releasing a video, an edited video on Rebel News.
Yeah.
And we did go into their speaking tours with Tamara Lynch, with Sheila Gunn-Reid. So it's good to hear that it went good. It's good to hear that it sold out. I know they're having a bunch of tour dates. We're also profiling the book that Sheila Gunn-Reid did on Quebec and their independence movement, what succeeded, what failed, what's it going to take to make Alberta an independent nation, and then just all the other good work Rebel News is kind of doing.
And they're also a pretty important source because now they have multiple different satellites around the world. So they have one in the UK, one in Australia, one that covers kind of Latin America, one in the US. So it's, again, that dissemination of information that prevents the federal government from fully censoring the movement.
Well, yeah, and Rebel News understands they're going to be the main target when these censorship bills come in. So they have an invested interest in Alberta independence, meaning I have no doubt they're going to move their headquarters to Alberta if Alberta gains that independence, just to protect their own necks at that point. The Canadian federal government is so soured on free speech. I mean, just as much as the UK and the EU has become, it's absolutely disgusting. I grew up in a Western culture that believed in free speech, and that was the fundamental principle everything else was built upon.
And Suna says, I heard they are using First Nations to fight against Alberta independence separation. We have a video on that, at least on the initial tactics that they were trying to do. And now with how they're just giving Vancouver and most of BC apparently over to First Nations for their own benefits, of course, for the benefits of those at the top. Well, it's no wonder that's also going to continue to ramp up within Alberta. However, a lot of the people using the talking points that, they can't just give Alberta away because of or Alberta can't become independent because of the First Nations, don't really know the history of the ceding of land that the First Nations already did within Alberta.
Yeah, not so much that, but just to kind of go answer her question. And I don't think it's going to be that cut and dry. I think the federal government's going to try to use the leadership of the First Nations. I don't think they have a lot of support from the people because the leadership of a lot of these tribes have been so corrupt and have pocketed so money while just giving crumbs to the people in the actual tribe. When I'm looking online, there's a lot of people from these tribes that I think are going to vote for Alberta independence and are not only going to vote for Alberta independence, but are right now trying to shine a light on what the elites in these tribes are actually doing. And it's not just in Alberta. BC has the same kind of problems.
Yes. And they have support from the UN in certain ways from UNDRIP. We're not going to get into all that right now. Maybe we'll do a separate video.
No, later on. I think
today we're talking about it a bit.
Quite a bit, because that is this is a major issue. What just happened to Vancouver, and they put it in a fisheries bill. They tried to hide this thing, and I think if Mark Carney gets a majority government, he's going to say we already set the precedent in BC. Well, why can't we just rewrite our treaties with these tribes? It wouldn't surprise me if he tried to do something like that before this independence vote comes up.
Lady Wolf says, it's a 44-page document, The Value of Freedom. It's very in-depth on how Alberta will function as an independent country, and maybe we can do a video about it, kind of breaking it down or going a bit over it.
It sounds like we can do 44 videos about it.
And Teresa McCleary says, I know canvassers that have only collected 5 or 10 signatures. We need many more from each canvasser to make the 178,000 needed. And again, I think it is better to think that it's less than more, but also if more and more people become canvassers, as long as they get one or two, it still adds to the tally. But yes, having the mentality that there's going to be less than more, I think works.
I don't think it's a mentality. I think we're in desperate need of signatures right now. I'm just going to be honest about it. The weather and the number of canvassers that we were originally estimated to have was supposed to be 50,000. It's now estimated to be around to 7,000 to 10,000. I mean, that's a dramatic drop. And I hate to say canvassers need to do more, because I think they're doing everything they can, especially when I'm watching the videos of these canvassers. It's just extremely hard in this weather and the way that Alberta is set up in these rural areas. Houses are just so far apart. And in these major cities like Calgary, I don't know how much support there actually is for the independence movement. I mean, they're voting NDP a lot of the time. In Edmonton, I would expect a lot more support. But that being said, you get a lot of Liberal people or NDP people in the major cities. And the rural areas are just really hard to canvass because it is so spread out.
Rosie says, the lineups in some locations have been astounding. Even the little town nearby had a line. And that's great to know as well.
It's good to see that. And I really do think we are going to get the 177,000, but I think it's going to be a real effort to do it. I mean, I wish this was in the summer we were getting the signatures, not in the middle of these blizzards.
And hold on. Teresa McCleary says, showing your badge number when collecting signatures. Yes. And yes, I believe you have to show it if somebody asks, or you have to have it visible while you collect signatures. And says, but putting it on the web can cause others to copy it, which is a good point as well. And I think what the point Marty was trying to make, I'm just going to infer here, I'm not sure, was that people shouldn't be afraid to walk around with their badge. However, that might also make them targets. So again, it's an insane situation. The crazies have put everybody in.
It's also an absolute shame what they're doing to canvassers, what they're doing to these local businesses, like the story Marty just told a minute ago. A lot of the canvassers that are speaking up that are watching their show seem to be female as well. And it's a shame they can't go canvass by themselves because it's just not going to be safe. That's obvious at this point. So now you're having to put 2 or 3 canvassers together, and you're not going to, it just cuts down on the amount of signatures that can actually be had at a time.
In that case, yes. But I do think it's better to do it in pairs, just in case anything crazy happens. And then also being able to record it, and report it. Tal says, you might want to consider delegating a few mods to your streams. Thank you. I'd be happy to do that to help when I'm available, to be in the thread. Thank you so much. I'll look into it.
Yeah,
I don't really know how it works.
Well, we haven't. We're a pretty small channel. We're just now experiencing growth, and really these Alberta independence lives. This is the first time we've had to deal with this many people.
Yes.
So we're just now starting to look into mods and things like that. One more thing with the petitions, though, I would love to see Rebel News actually bring out their truck that they have. The big screen on the side, and it just says we're getting signatures for petitions. It's really hard to even know that these people with Alberta flags are getting signatures on the side of the road. I mean, he's waving the clipboard, but the clipboard's so small it's hard to see.
Teresa says, Stay Free Alberta has a link for canvassers to report anything they encounter. And yeah, that's good information too. And thank you. And I'll repeat it before we end the stream. And also says, Calgary police arrested 2 people for harassing canvassers yesterday. One of the people then verbally attacked the officers. And again, it's crazy, people, but we'll continue to see it escalating.
Oh, it's going to get...
And I suspect there will also be paid ones. The people that will be paid to continue with the harassing.
Yeah.
Lyle Norman says you should contact John Bolton. He's a great influencer. We are going to be doing a video on him as well.
Yeah, I'm starting to gather names of a lot of people that we're hoping to interview. A lot of people have actually started to reach out for us, which is very heartening because we are such a small channel. But the fact that we're talking about Alberta independence, I think it's a close-knit community. So we're trying to start setting up days and times for interviews. Plus, we haven't done a lot of interviews. So the technology involved...
we're figuring it out.
It's another little step for us.
Yes. Tal says, FYI, use an old phone with open camera app installed to continually record so that you don't have to stop the recording with your current phone to dial 911 or just send receive calls, and having that ability to have a continuous recording as well.
Yeah.
And there are some body cams you can find, but I mean, if you can use an old phone, then
We used
You
to
don't
go
have
to
to-
we used to go to protests a lot and bring our whether it was the DJI body cam or the 360 cam. But what we would do, I mean, we had extra batteries, but once it kind of dies, you might not know it dies. So I would hook it directly up to an external battery with a cord, so it would just continuously stay charged.
Yes. Roland Chapin, hello, says, as a third-generation Albertan ex-airborne, I say Alberta independence is our only chance to escape Canada's communism. Thank you for your service.
Now's the time. And like there's a million cultural reasons to kind of separate from Canada. You're just going in two different directions. I just don't know if the messaging's getting out there of how financially secure Alberta is going to be on its own. Canada is going to be an absolute mess. And the fact that Canada's not waking up to that and coming to the negotiating table, or at least trying to keep Alberta, they're taking the opposite tactics of saying, you're a bunch of traitors and everything else. And that's just going to spearhead the Alberta independence movement even more.
And Teresa McClary, thank you so much for the $5 super chat. Says Rebel had the truck in Edmonton with the MP that crossed the floor on it. Well, good. I mean, and name and shame as well, because that to me is very egregious that people voted for somebody that was presenting themselves in one way and then completely left his constituents out in the cold, literally, and crossed the floor to the side that many of those who voted for him probably would. That's the last thing that they would want, and they know what the consequences will be.
Well, and it's good to hear Rebel News has the truck out there, because that truck was in Ottawa and on the East Coast. So the fact that they brought it out there, and I'm noticing a lot of their coverage is starting to focus on Alberta independence. And I'm also noticing their coverage of Alberta independence is getting a good view rate. So that's going to spur them on to keep covering that. I'm sure they're going to be the biggest independent media covering this right up until the vote and after, which is a great thing.
Mm-hmm. And I'll just read a few more.
And another good thing is when these censorship bills do get put into effect by Mark Carney, having having a network like Rebel News that will really crowdfund for a lot of independent content creators if they come up against legal trouble and the federal government is going to be crucially important.
And Doug Patterson, hello, says,
two more comments and then we'll go back to...
So listening to John Bolton, he goes around and talks to a lot of canvassers, and they were saying that it's about 95% thumbs up and maybe 5% against. The wacko squeaky wheel gets the green. But then in some bigger cities, it might also be more negative, I think.
Yeah, but it's not wacko squeaky wheel. If you know it's going to come out there, it's nice to know that there's 95% support. But if you can get that 5% on video, that makes international news and brings a lot of eyes that normally aren't on it onto the independence movement. It's just a different way to get the international community paying attention. Mm-hmm. We are going to have a video later about the Costco we used to go to in Vancouver about a wacko that was in there. I know it was the Costco we used to go to because I know the security guard that works there. And I just put it in the other sections so we could talk about it.
Roland Chapin says, yes, weaponized immigration is Alberta's greatest danger. That's why we must vote for independence ASAP, or we will never get to win a vote again. I mean, and the federal government is going to do everything in its power to continue to assure it is that way. And just quickly, Roland Chapin says, me too, Keith Wilson is a good choice for our first president.
Yeah, and I want to hear what other people's choices would be for Alberta's first president. My choice has been Keith Wilson. Danielle Smith is now off the table for me personally, but I'm sure there's a lot of people that do support her. If you do support her, tell me why. And if you do, I mean, there's also Jeffrey Rath and a lot of other people.
And just quickly, Roland Chapin says, thank you so much, says God bless you, Nat and Guy. And also all of you that are watching and all of you that are invested in this and have been putting words into action and even just spreading out the message or talking to other people or starting debates or discussions about this. I think that every single little thing helps, even if it feels like it's not a big thing, just talking to a family member, coworker, neighbor about it, not even just starting without giving your opinion, just saying, oh, what do you think about this? And get the conversation going so it stops being so taboo. And also so the propaganda and the narrative that is going to start and continue to be imposed by the federal government doesn't reach them before truth reaches them.
Well, and I do need to say, and I say this every time we profile a content creator that supports Alberta independence, but when I first started researching content creators that were like conservative that I watched in Canada, and I watched a lot of them, I was absolutely shocked on how many conservative commentators in independent media just won't talk about it. And then I was like, why won't they talk about it? Let me see what their most popular videos are. And almost all of them built a national audience off of supporting Pierre Poilievre. And they don't want to be called a traitor. They don't want to betray national conservatives. They're scared they're going to lose their audience, so they won't talk about Alberta independence.
However, Alberta independence is the one topic that fully highlights all of the issues that are going on with the Liberals, with the federal government, with Canada in general, with the Canadian population and its now lack of culture and its lack of standing up for its own country. And the TDS, the Trump Derangement Syndrome. The Alberta independence movement is what encompasses all of this and is a great also avenue to continue to talk about these topics and actually do something about it. So it is surprising to watch so many commentators and people that would probably speak out and never spoke about the truckers' convoy, for example, stay mostly silent.
Well, what I was going to say about this was all the like really, really big content creators kind of steer away from this, or if they talk about it on their live, they brush over it very quickly and they won't make edited videos on it. They're scared to touch it. And these are the biggest content creators in independent media in Canada. So it's very important that we support smaller content creators and push them to a mid-size and a bigger size. I'm starting to build a network of smaller content creators that are supporting Alberta independence. I'm knowing who they are, but it's almost like the Alberta independence movement is going to have to make these small content creators either mid-size or big size so that they can have a voice, because the big national content creators you would expect to support this movement just aren't coming out in support of it like I thought they would.
Except Clyde.
Clyde
does something is great.
There's some exceptions. There's the Fringe, there's Clyde. I mean, there are some exceptions, don't get me wrong, but I must follow 30 large content creators in Canada, and there's only the exception to the rule, like Clyde and like some other people. I mean, we're still very small. So for us to touch the subject, like it's like whatever, I'm gonna say what I'm gonna say.
Yeah. Where does Viva stand?
That's what I was kind of wondering.
I'd love to talk to Viva Frei because he left for the U.S. a while ago, and him and Robert Barnes, who is a great constitutional lawyer, usually have pretty spicy opinions. So I wouldn't think for him to shy away from it, especially since he left like us and saw the issues from the beginning. So.
Well, I'm thinking most content creators that have already left, like us, are firmly on the side of Alberta independence. The fact that we felt so betrayed by Canada that we had to leave. I mean, and then when I look at Canada now, I'm just absolutely disgusted. Alberta is like that shining star and that shining hope of the things that I was hoping the rest of Canada would kind of do and wake up to common sense.
Yeah.
So I'd be confident Viva supports it, but I would love to know. Maybe we'll do a video on him, and I'll try to research if he's said anything about it.
Yeah, maybe on a stream I'll try to super chat him or something and ask him, see how he reacts.
Yeah.
And then we can talk about that.
Okay, let's go back into the stories.
From Corey Hogan, quote, the U.S. accounts for 71% of our exports, and their trade actions have made 2025 a difficult year, but we're diversifying markets, we're investing billions in infrastructure, have the most foreign investment in 18 years, and employment is growing. We will win this trade war. Despite the United States being almost 9 times the population, Canada created 20,000 more jobs, allegedly.
This is the kind of BS that the Canadian news will push, and they love to push statistics and flip things around. We cover U.S. politics a lot on this channel. I think the U.S. has a lot of weight on culture worldwide, and of every other culture outside of Canada I cover, the U.S. is the most. I am a big Trump supporter overall. I know a lot of Canadians don't like Trump. I do. That being said, I will call him out when he does things I don't like.
And we have a lot.
Just like when I call out Danielle Smith. That being said, this statistic is completely backwards. The reason the U.S. Has so little jobs created was because they fired hundreds of thousands of government workers, meaning they're deregulating the American system, and they're trying to shrink the size of government, which I like to see. Yes. If you were to compare private sector to private sector, the numbers are completely different. Trump has created 190,000 jobs, I think, and the Canadian private sector has been struggling. 1 out of every 4 citizens in Canada works for the works for the government, which is absolutely insane statistic. That's 25% of your population work for the government. Which way do you think they're going to vote if they care for their jobs? I mean, that creates almost a rigged system of voting.
Because you don't want to lose your job.
Yeah.
And the U.S. has been reporting some job loss from AI in certain sectors, but at the same time, there's other sectors that have grown and they never get reported on. We used to report on it a lot during our geopolitics lives, and still continues to grow.
Yeah,
but only the negative and only the firings get reported.
But the American sector job creation is completely distorted by international media. Because we cover a lot of international media, they like to lump all the firings Trump did of government workers in with the private sector, and it distorts the numbers.
There's also been a lot of talk with There's also been a lot of talk recently with the budget coming out, and we also spoke about it, about the oil price and the downturns and what happens to Alberta, and the budget is because of this low on oil price. But Jeff Rath here says, quote, one of the biggest reasons for Alberta independence is being able to manage soft oil prices without equalization going to Quebec, Ontario, and the trailer parks of the Maritimes. He said it, not me. Alberta can easily navigate oil price downturns because Michael Tomlinson had said, how do you think being part of Canada helps us in this situation? We will not receive any support or equalization from Ottawa, and we will not have our taxes reduced, nor will the net transfer of wealth out of Alberta be. Do you want me to finish reading?
I would like to see a new system in Alberta once independence is gained. There's so much wealth in Alberta. Right now, there's a lot, but after you have all the deregulations gone from the Canadian government kind of stepping on Alberta, I think it's going to be a multi-trillion-dollar economy. I would like to see budget money set aside from the year before, so you're never in a deficit. You always know how much you're going to spend, and then you spend exactly that much. It would be different than how a lot of other governments are kind of run. And I would also like to see the rethinking of taxation of citizens. I know Trump was rethinking that in the United States with the tariffs. Now, there's been a couple of hiccups with that. But his ultimate goal was to take off all taxation of citizens and really kind of rely on tariffs and private sector taxation. I would like to see Alberta kind of move to a model like that. And that would change the paradigm between governments and their citizens. And it would make a lot of other citizens around the world kind of wake up and say, Alberta's doing that, why can't we?
Hiccups with the Supreme Court decision, but that has, in the end, ended up strengthening the legal case and the ways in which Trump continues to implement the tariffs. So in a way, it actually made it stronger. But they don't report on that part. They don't report on what the Supreme Court actually said, how it actually or didn't affect the tariffs and the new mechanisms that are now going to be used that are a lot stronger in the long run to continue to impose tariffs.
Well, Trump's actually going to be able to increase the tariffs. He just has to do it in a more convoluted way that's harder to take it down when he wants to take it down. The initial reason he implemented the way he did is he wanted to be able to put it on and then take it down and be able to renegotiate quickly. And you've seen this, a high tariff with a lot of countries, then they negotiated and it went down to about 10% was the average. Now what's happening, he's having to use different mechanisms where he's having to put permanent tariffs in place, which is going to be harder to take down over time.
But now let's look at Alberta independence explained in 20 seconds flat.
Socialism is when you take £10,000 from one productive person who works and give £1,000 to 10 people who do not work. And then you blame the one productive person for all the country's problems, so the 10 people will vote for you. And then the productive people all leave and the system implodes on itself. Socialism is when you
that's
take
exactly what's happening with Alberta. And I'm glad he put the last part in. And then you blame the people that are paying all the taxes.
Because they left.
And then they're going to leave.
Yeah.
You blame them for all your problems. And that's what exactly Mark Carney's going to do in the snap election. He's going to pit nationalists against independence individuals and blame the independence movement for all Canada's problems.
And Alberta, just in general, also for all of Canada's problems.
Well, and then what's going to happen, those people that are for independence are going to end up leaving with Alberta. And then Canada sunk.
But from YAG Wave, quote, Daniel Smith states that the province has put $15 million into the bid process for the World Cup of Hockey to Edmonton and Calgary in 2028. Priorities.
I believe we pledged $15 million to assist with the bid. You can double up and check with Minister Boychenko, Andrew Boychenko on that. But it would be exciting. I understand it's a joint bid, and so both Calgary and Edmonton would benefit from it. It'd be 2028, and so it would be right after the new event center is open in Calgary. And it would be I think mid-year on Olympics. It's going to be, I think, the second most watched sporting event in the world when it comes to hockey. So we're crossing our fingers and hoping that the NHL Players Association as well as the owners.
Okay. Yeah, and I don't actually mind this, even though they're over budget. This is something that can bring a lot into the economy. That I didn't realize how popular the Edmonton Oilers were as far as their merchandising goes. They're one of the top global brands, which was shocking to me. I was watching a documentary about it the other day, and that's even outside of hockey. That being said, if Alberta gains its independence, I would like to see something like a GoFundMe where you kind of rely on local businesses to put this $15 million up rather than the government. Like the Edmonton Oilers would step up, put $2 million on the bid, and maybe Tim Hortons would step up, put another $1 million, and then they would get recognition through the city. Something like that. Yeah, sponsorship of trying to get the bid itself. But hockey is a huge part of Albertan culture, and I don't mind it being put up. Hopefully they win that bid. Otherwise, it's $15 million wasted. But yeah.
But I will also say it's interesting that this is being planned in for 2028 because when they announced the budget, and recently we've also seen that they're increasing the taxes for tourism. So tourism is going to get more expensive to Alberta, especially to the cities. So how would those taxes impact and also maybe recoup money? Et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I don't know why I thought Banff was in BC, but Banff's in Alberta. Is that correct?
I've been there and I don't know.
Look it up because I was looking on the map. I looked on you went there the one time.
It's in Alberta, yeah.
Yeah, it's in Alberta. I thought it was in BC, but I was looking I was looking on the map the other day.
No, yeah, it's in Alberta.
But
sorry,
man, they're saying you have to pay a toll when you get off the freeway to get to that city. All kinds of things. So,
it's beautiful, but
yeah, it's beautiful, but it's definitely a little bit elitist. That being said, I don't like to see taxes on tourism at all.
And they increase them now. So I don't remember the specifics, but essentially anybody who books a hotel now also has to pay an extra tax, kind of like the way they do it in New York and Miami and certain cities that have a lot of tourism, where you just get fee after fee after fee after fee. And now a lot of those, or some of those at least, will be provincially imposed.
But it's not just Alberta doing it. Trump did it. Trump has done it with the whole United States. I think there's an extra $250 you have to pay now.
I don't super agree
Mexico's doing it as well. I would like to see Alberta step up, not put a tax on tourism, and then advertise that.
But from Arzalaya, quote, Carney's Liberal government just screwed over the people that elected him into office. Are we moving into Canadian news now?
It's all kind of mixed.
Okay.
It's all kind of mixed today.
Okay.
That being said, this is the biggest story that's probably going to happen over a long time.
And it also
I've been following property rights specifically within BC for a long time. There's something going on between the federal government, the UN, and these First Nations tribes. And I've been looking at this, and private property rights could become a thing of the past, especially in BC. Or I think they wanted to adopt the Chinese model. I'll talk a little bit about that after we watch this video.
From Arzalaya, quote, Carney's Liberal government just screwed over the people that elected him into office. He gave all of Vancouver to the Musqueam band, but he still wants you to pay property taxes, and he doesn't want to show you the deal that he's made. WTF. And exactly, WTF. We had already seen an example of this with some land over in Richmond and Surrey in BC, but now they're going after even more.
That was on a provincial level through laws brought in by the UN that the British Columbia government adopted, and the UN is trying to push these into multiple countries. I think it's a big plan to take sovereignty away from the countries, or at least sovereign land rights away from the countries.
Property rights. Bye.
But number two, in North Vancouver, there is a reservation that you can actually buy property on as a non-native individual. What they do is they give you a 99-year lease on that property. It's a little bit cheaper than buying a property outright, but you'd never own it. This is the same model that the Chinese government uses. You're not actually allowed to own property in China. You're only allowed to lease it for 99 years. So if the federal government cedes all this land to these tribes, what they're going to do is start giving 99-year leases out, so citizens no longer own their homes.
Fully own their land.
But what happened now in British Columbia, the federal government came in with a fisheries act and ceded a bunch of the land during the attack that happened in Iran. I think that they thought this wouldn't make headline news, and it was a good way to sneak this in.
Guys, this is massive and breaking news. I generally don't make videos this early in the morning, but this one's important. This is still not covered in mainstream media, but Juno News just broke the story that Canada just handed control of all of Vancouver. This includes Richmond, this includes Burnaby, to the Musqueam Indian Band. And the area is larger than what I highlighted, but this is the general area. Literally, it's all of Richmond, Vancouver, and Burnaby. And they did it quietly. And the Liberal government, they're refusing to publicly release the agreement that they made with the Musqueam Indian Band that recognizes the Aboriginal title over to the vast majority of BC, including Metro Vancouver and the surrounding areas. This affects nearly 2 million people. They buried it in a fisheries announcement. That was on Friday, coincidentally or not, while things were ramping up in Iran. And Juno News rightfully said that this could radically undermine property rights in one of Canada's largest and most populated metropolitan areas. And the title of the news release that the government decided to do is that Canada signed a historic agreement recognizing rights, stewardship, and fisheries. Essentially, the government still wants you to pay your taxes on that land, but they want Aboriginal title on top of it. For those who don't know, this recently happened in Cowichan, in a small area where people were then unable to get a mortgage. The government had to step in and back up the loans because banks would not touch it. Guys, this is really, really bad, and it has not hit mainstream media yet.
Yeah, and they did a larger ceding of land. The federal government did on some island nations that were in BC as well. So BC is all messed up, and this is why BC will never get its real independence because they're already starting to break apart from First Nations because they never had the same treaties that Alberta had. Alberta has strong treaties. That being said, like, it wouldn't surprise me if Mark Carney would come in there and try to renegotiate it just to block the Alberta independence movement or do something absolutely crazy. Why is the federal government coming in and ceding the land of BC as well? Now that they set that precedent that they can do that through a fisheries act, what's going to stop them from doing that in Alberta? Alberta needs to realize that this may be the last chance for independence.
Because of shenanigans. From Table Salt, also major breaking, quote, the government is trying to bury this one. Canada has just signed an agreement with the Musqueam First Nation, giving them property title rights to most of Vancouver, which is insane.
And this is
what they called it.
This is one of the biggest cities in the entire country. There's something else afoot underneath the surface. Between the UN, the First Nations, and the federal government, it looks like they're working hand in hand on multiple different levels to get rid of private property rights. Why does that sound familiar? Because you will own nothing and you will be happy. This is how they're trying to actually enact this in a bunch of different ways.
So I'll just read a little bit. It says, Musqueam Rights Recognition Agreement, quote, recognizes that Musqueam has Aboriginal rights, including title within their traditional territory, and establishes a framework for incremental implementation of rights and to nation.
Okay, you can kind of leave it there.
I know, but I wanted to just read that bit.
That being said, they're ceding a lot of the rights on these territories. This sets a precedent. So now the tribe itself will be able to make a lawsuit on the back of this saying actually people that have houses on these lands, this is owned by the tribe. And then they can go into negotiations that we'll cede the property for the next 99 years, but eventually it will come back to us, much like the mall in North Vancouver is made, much like a lot of little industrial centers in North Vancouver. Also, they're leased to the government on a 99-year lease or to private property owners for only 99 years. Mm-hmm. So let's go back into some questions.
Sure. Comments.
Or questions.
Roland Chapin says, as we pursue more signatures, we must now start door knocking. And Tal is answering your karate question. Tal says, at the guy, I am Shokotan Karate Nidan second dan, amongst other discipline studies. No idea what that means.
Well, it's a lot better to hear that you're doing karate rather than Taekwondo, because Taekwondo's a bunch of BS. When I first started doing martial arts when I was really young, I did Taekwondo, and drank the Kool-Aid from and then I got in a fight. And then I realized, oh, this shit doesn't work. And then as I got older, I realized it was more based around a sport. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu works really well. So does Muay Thai. Karate works very well. You can see if something works by if it's tested in MMA. And there are a lot of people that do karate, like Machida and a few other people, where it really does work.
And Sean, hello Sean, says, don't know much about Alberta, but having canvassed for the recall that elected Governor Schwarzenegger, who I worked for, is to be careful for government employed. Got 5 speeding tickets for bumper stickers, or for having a bumper sticker.
Yeah.
The shenanigans will increase.
There's a lot of recall elections and stuff that happen in California. I used to live in California for a little while. I used to live between Vancouver and California. I was kicked back between my mom and my grandparents for a lot of my life. So I cover California elections very closely, and there's a lot of shenanigans when it comes to these petitions. If the government doesn't like the petition, they're going to undermine it. They're going to fund NGOs to get fake signatures. So they think they have more signatures than when they go to submit them. Say they need 100,000, they got 300,000. They think it's enough. No, there is 250,000 fake signatures there that were financed by the government through an NGO. There's a lot of backdoor.
That cannot get verified magically.
I would say of every state within the United States, California has the most shady politics. You also don't need voter ID to vote there. A matter of fact, they won't even take a voter ID if you try to show it to them.
In Mexico, here we have a specific voter ID card, and yet they say that, oh no, we have to be able to poor immigrants. They don't know how to do it. They do it in all their countries. Yeah. Even Somalia also has voter ID.
Yeah, well, it was a shame how bad Arnold Schwarzenegger was as a governor, but as bad as he was, I don't think he was half as bad as Gavin Newsom.
I don't think anybody can be half as bad as
the funny thing is Gavin Newsom is setting himself up to potentially win 2028 here.
We'll talk about that tomorrow. And Harmony, hello Harmony, says, good evening to both of you. I really enjoy listening to both of you. Thank you. Nice dynamics between the two of you. Oh, you should watch us off camera. We debate. We have an interesting relationship. We're married.
You should have seen when I rolled my ankle. Oh my God. I was
sitting get the car. He yelled at me, go get the car. And he crushed my hand.
Well, I was
because he was in pain.
And you were telling me, calm down, don't raise your voice, just move over to the side. You look crazy.
Go sit, because he was sitting on the middle of the sidewalk. I was like, go sit on.
I was in so much pain, I could not. I was like, get the freaking car. We got to get out of here.
I'm pretty good in I'm really good at staying calm. I worked at high schools. I've dealt with students doing dumb things and then having to go to the hospital. So I'm pretty calm in a emergency situation.
Finally, I yell at her enough where she starts walking back to get the car, and she's just moseying back to the car as slow as can be. I'm like, don't bother running by any means. I'm not in any pain.
Well, because it was at night, and I didn't want to be seen running around the streets of Mexico.
And I think you were
close to Mexico City.
You were a little bit upset because it was supposed to be a romantic dinner, and we had to go home after that. And we never go out for dinner.
We got food to go.
I did.
Yes. Lady Wolf says, Keith Wilson. Oh, because we asked who people would think would be a good choice for president of Alberta. Lady Wolf says, Keith Wilson would be my choice too. And Roland Chapin says, in the future, I hope you two come visit Alberta. Of course, I've been to Alberta. Oh, yeah. We did a whole, with family members, we did a whole, what's it called? With a car?
Road trip?
Car ride, road trip.
We did a car ride.
This is when my ESL comes out. We did a whole road trip through BC and Alberta, and it is beautiful, cold. But yes, of course we would go, and I'd love to go report as well before the actual vote if they let us into Canada, because it'll be Canada still at that point.
Yeah, the thing is, by the time we're going to go up there, I think it's going to happen much more close to the Alberta Independence Movement vote, and I think Carney's going to win a snap election before that. And if he wins a majority government, he's rolling in those censorship bills, and he's going to start attacking content creators and arresting them for hate speech and everything else that are in those bills. At a certain point, I know based upon what we said even before the Alberta Independence Movement, if those bills come into effect, we would literally be outlaws within Canada.
Yeah.
Based upon what the UK did and the way Canada is sending up its censorship, it's looking just like the UK.
Teresa says, Jeff Rath is too much of a loose cannon.
Yeah, and there are a lot of things around Jeff Rath, and that's why I didn't pick him for president of Alberta or leader of Alberta if it comes to be, but he is definitely a great resource for the Alberta independence movement, and he has a ton of personality.
Yes.
And
that is essential.
And he knows how to use the media against itself. He's like a Trump figure for Alberta when the independent media, when the mainstream media comes to interview him, they think they're going to have a gotcha. And by the end of the interview, he's just completely changed the paradigm on him, and it's getting clipped worldwide.
So as a speaker, he's great, but I also know a lot of people didn't love that we compared him to Trump, but it's in that aspect where he knows how to expertly handle the media and how to expertly switch the narrative that they're trying to implement on its back, and it stops being effective. So,
well, yeah, and he's
as a speaker, I think he's really good.
Yeah, and he's literally he's a lawyer as well, but he's the opposite of Keith Wilson. So it's a great dynamic to send them into the media together, or one's going to do interviews over here, the other over here. As a leadership component for the Alberta independence movement, it's absolutely fantastic, especially when I look at Saskatchewan, which is one of the other big independence movements. It just doesn't have that dynamic for its leadership.
Hopefully it continues to ramp up, though.
But what Keith Wilson and Jeffrey Rath are doing together, they're setting up a framework for Saskatchewan. So Saskatchewan may not need to have that same kind of leadership if the framework is played out enough or built out enough.
And Suna says, Keith and Jeff said they don't want to lead Alberta because they said they're not qualified for it. At least that's what I've heard. And I think they would be, even if they don't take up, positions as a cabinet, just the fact that they have been able to push this movement and kind of build it and construct it and help it so much, I think they'll be useful even if they don't get into leadership positions.
The paradigm,
they might be more useful if they don't get into leadership positions.
Well, the paradigm of what's happened with the Alberta independence movement, you've got to see a lot of people and what their character are. And Keith Wilson has just stood up above everybody else in spades. And I would say, even if he's not qualified, he's somebody that I really, really do trust as a leader. There's only so much you can know and trust somebody. But if I was going to put anybody in a leadership role, even if they're underqualified, it would be Keith Wilson because of the level of trust he's done through his actual work.
And I will say, I don't remember who said this phrase initially, but the best politician is the one that doesn't want to be one.
Yeah.
Because everybody that does want to be one wants to be there for the power. And that's why career politicians, at least in my opinion, are the worst kinds of politicians that are always there just to vie for more and more power. You want the person that doesn't want to do it, wants a change and wants to look after their fellow citizens, but doesn't want to be a politician and doesn't want the advantages that come with being a politician. That's how you find the honest people, the ones that don't want to be there.
Well, maybe if Jeffrey Rath is a Trump-like figure, and I like Trump, so it's meant to be a compliment. Maybe Keith Wilson is a George Washington-like figure because after the United States gained its independence, George Washington, they offered him to be king, and he chose not to be.
He chose not to be.
So...
Teresa says,
we got George Washington and Donald Trump running the Alberta independence movement. That's a good combination. Somebody should make a meme on that.
Teresa says, Guy, you are bang on there. And I do know what Teresa means. It was about when we were talking about the content creators not speaking up about Alberta independence or choosing their more national audience versus losing a lot of viewers.
Oh, wait, repeat that? And Teresa was my mother's name. My mother has passed away now, so.
So Teresa says, Guy, you are bang on there when you were talking about content creators that don't want to speak up about Alberta independence.
And I didn't know that. It was right. A lot of these content creators that I follow on a national level that have these huge audience, it would be natural for them to support the Alberta independence movement. So I was making a list of people I was going to profile. I just assumed it was a lot of the content creators I had been following for well over a decade. And come to find out, it's not that they don't support the movement.
Silence.
They're scared to touch it. And you can see the fear there based upon what they're covering. And then when you go to their most popular videos, it's always Pierre Poilievre. And then it's usually a Pierre Poilievre interview, which they get access to the Conservative Party. And the most recent Conservative Party what do you call that?
Conference.
Convention, where Pierre won his leadership. They didn't want to allow people that were supporting the Alberta independence movement in there. So it was very telling on a lot of the creators that were even in there, whether they were going to support the Alberta independence movement or not.
Yeah. And I mean, again, they're completely in their, they have all of their, I'm I'm trying to phrase it in a certain way and I can't figure out how to say it.
Say
Están en su derecho. It's in my brain. They're completely within their rights to not support the Alberta independence movement, but then
they got way too much, and they have, in my opinion, for me personally, when I watch them, because I still watch them on. They're great content creators. That being said, they have way too much hope in Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Party in Canada. Even if Poilievre manages to win,
and that's the thing,
he's sacrificed a lot of his first principles. Number one, but number two, there's only enough votes in Canada the way the system's rigged for him to win a minority government. So he's not going to be able to make the massive changes that are needed to save Canada. And the Alberta independence vote, with one vote, you can choose to save that province and become one of the most, one of the best economies in the world.
And also, because of the way the Liberals have gone about it, a lot of the legislation, the laws, the rules that have been implemented and that have completely changed the country and made it for the worse, even just in the past 10 years, it would take, in my opinion, at least 1 or 2 decades to reverse it. So it wouldn't be an immediate change. And a lot of people are putting out that hope. And Pierre, I think, is trying to build that hope and say, yes, we can do this. Yes, we can change Canada. It's going to take a lot longer than I think a lot of people are envisioning that still want to have a little bit of faith in Canada. I think that's why I continue to say it's too far gone. It's going to take a generation or two to fully change what has been done to it. And then the mentality of the people too.
Well, and even if Pierre Poilievre gets in there by some miracle with a minority government, what he's going to be looking at is all the other parties are going to stand up against any progress he wants to make. And he's going to think, well, I need to get a majority. How do I do that? I got to widen the tent out. I got to sacrifice a lot of my more of my principles, which I'm just not going to agree with.
Roland Chapin says, Mitch Sylvester, Eva Chipiak, Dr. Dennis Maudray are all good choices for first president. They are beyond corruption and loyal to Albertans. We are fortunate to have many talented, honest people here. And I do think, again, culturally, Alberta is completely different to the rest of Canada. And there is a lot of great, honest people there. So even if Jeff Rath or Keith Wilson don't want to take up the mantle, or they want to just continue to work in the background to save Alberta, then I do think there's a lot of good options.
Yeah, but I also don't care how honest and how trustworthy somebody is. I want radical transparency built into the system, and I think most governments shy away from that. Alberta has a real chance because they do have a lot of people that would make good leaders, but if you can build radical transparency into the system as well, through whether it's content creators, talking about what's going on inside. There was recently an interview that Mario Newfall did with a politician in Cyprus who used to be a content creator that became a politician who had no knowledge of politics. So what he did was make videos on subjects he wanted to educate himself on that educated the public. He built a party from there. What he did was make videos on everybody that wanted to run from the party. They had a vote. It brought a lot of interest into politics that normally wasn't in Cyprus, and it's completely changed the paradigm now. It's very interesting, but building in new systems into government for transparency and other things, I think are going to be really, really important. And also building in transparency for these budgets, line by line transparency that's easily accessible to the general public.
But the ones that are in power obviously don't want to do that. Tal says, David Moose on the Loose has been very skittish about covering the independence movement so far anyways. We did a video about Moose on the Loose.
He's been a little bit skittish, but he has covered it, and he's firmly going to come down on the side of independence, I think. I watch him a lot. His family's actually from Alberta as well, even though he lives in BC now. He's originally from Alberta. He said publicly that his family's in support of the Alberta independence movement. Yeah, and I think he's probably scared of losing some of his audience, but we did profile him. I do like him, and I do think he'll land on the side of independence. Somebody else that's a bit skittish that we did profile was Mark Nixon. He'll brush over the subject, and you can feel that he wants to land on the side of independence. But again, I think he's scared of losing a lot of his audience.
And Sean says, I would love to come to Alberta, because I believe Sean is in the US. Only been to British Columbia, but that was in the 80s to go to Expo 86, and the 90s to go back to Vancouver, BC to see the city, which was going downhill. Imagine how it is now. Again, we left for a bunch of reasons. And just in the 13 and a bit years that I lived in Vancouver, I saw, because I came in during Stephen Harper, at the end of Stephen Harper, and then Justin Trudeau came in. Year after year, it just got worse and worse and worse and worse. And in the 90s is when they started implementing all of their drug policies, or some of their drug policies, and I think that's what contributed. And then it just went insane.
Well, it's a damn shame.
Unlivable.
It's a damn shame the government policies of the BC government, especially the Vancouver government, and whoever's in mayor is always going to be woke and have these crazy policies. It's probably the most beautiful city in Canada, and the weather for anybody that's coming from America or anywhere else, it's generally warm. Warmer than the rest of Canada. You only get a few days of snow, but it's just
and people don't know how to drive
it's
when
just
that happens.
completely mismanaged, and I have no hope in that city in the long run.
Roland Chapin says Alberta created 20,000 new jobs, not Canada, but they also created a bunch of jobs through just hiring more people into the government. Expand the government as much as you can and then say you created a lot of new jobs.
Yeah, but there was a lot of jobs created by Alberta, and we did do a video on that last week. We did a couple economic videos, and in one of them, when we profiled the federal government bragging about how many jobs they created, and all the jobs they were talking about were literally in Alberta. Canada's failing, Alberta's succeeding. Canada's trying to take credit for everything Alberta's doing and claim it as their own success.
Because it's still part of the country.
Yeah.
So just don't give them that. Tuna says, most know the only way to fix Alberta separation is to restructure the Constitution, and that is a no-no, since that will mean more power to Alberta.
There's going to be need to be a lot of restructuring, a lot of things that happened with the Albertan government. I talked about it on the Danielle Smith video, I think, about there needs to be a way for self-deregulation of a government, meaning as the government grows bigger, it becomes bloated and more bloated, and the government never takes off departments or programs it creates, or very rarely. There needs to be a way where it triggers an automatic review of policies, and then there has to be a vote whether we keep that program or we get rid of that program, so it self-deregulates. And if there's no vote taken, then it automatically deregulates itself.
Trying to.
Okay,
we have a lot of comments.
We'll do two more comments. Oh, we just got a super chat, so let's read.
Thank you so much, Steve Tafaro, for the 499 super chat. It says, without an Alberta Save Act, the independence vote would wind up like the USA's 2020 steal.
Oh yeah.
And that is why all the signatures have to be verified. You do need to show ID and proof of residence when you sign the petition, at least.
It's just too much for Canada to lose. This is $1 trillion vote that's going to be going down. So to think the federal government's not going to do some backhanded things like hire an NGO to get fake signatures, to get fake petitioners and everything else. Or even to pay people within the movement that collect the signatures that are supposed to hold on to them to burn the signatures after. I mean, there's nothing.
I wouldn't put
it past
anything
them.
past them.
I mean, even if it cost them $1 billion, they would be saving money to give somebody $1 billion and hand them the signatures over and then burn them. Like, there's a lot riding for Canada on this, even if they're not willing to admit it at this point. And Stephen Savaro has been a long-time viewer, so thanks a lot.
I think the stream died for a bit, but I think we're back.
No, it's back. It's
okay.
Going live right now.
Because it went dark on me and it said we weren't connected. But, and even with that, even with the necessities of being able to, or having to show ID and show proof of residency for the signatures, they can play shenanigans and say, oh, well, it doesn't have a right postal code, for example, or there's a gap in the postal code that you showed, so that's why the signature isn't verifiable. I'm sure they will try anything to count less signatures than more.
Well, and because we are having a lot of people from Alberta watching right now, I'll mention a couple American business people that are also content creators or get interviewed a lot that are really supporting the Alberta independence movement. These are important figures because they're arranging a lot of the pieces of the chessboard in the United States to help Alberta financially once they get their independence. They've gone to a few conferences about the Alberta independence movement, and they actually talk about it regularly. And I've been following them for years, long before Alberta independence even came up. The first one is Martin Armstrong, and the second one is Tom Longo. So I highly recommend watching both of them. They talk a lot about geopolitics, economics, but they're big supporters of the Alberta independence movement, and they're the kind of supporters that you want. They're not just content creators. Martin Armstrong actually created a computer before there was AI that who basically predict the future and predict markets that other governments pay him a lot of money to come over and help them arrange their governments. When Brexit happened, when the EU needed to make its own currency, when Japan was in financial trouble, they asked for his help. So he's going to be an important figure in the independence movement, I think. Okay, let's get back into some stories.
And if we didn't say thank you, Steve, I think I just went in and read the message. But thank you so much as well. We have too many comments, and there's good ones. I know. We're gonna move on. But somebody asked if that's why you have a California accent.
Oh, I maybe because I
don't know what kind of accent he has, because he says things weird.
Americans say I have a Canadian accent. Canadians say I have an American accent. Mexicans say, oh, you can't speak Spanish. But yeah, I was born in North Vancouver, grew up there most of my life. Once in a while, I was given down to my grandmother in California, so I grew up there quite a bit. So I picked up an accent there, and then I also lived in the States for quite a while. I lived in most of the South, so I've lived in Texas, Florida, a bit of a Southern accent, and then you mix that with a Canadian accent.
It's weird.
Yeah.
So there's certain words he'll say where I'm like, that's like a Southern drawl for some reason, like darling.
And I don't pronunciate my words very well, so that I think they come out muddled on YouTube, especially with a microphone.
Yes. And I don't know what I talk like.
Well, you went to a British school in Mexico. You grew up. That's how you learn English so well.
But I also used to watch a lot of TV shows, American TV shows, from Friends to, I'm a girl, from Friends to Gilmore Girls to The OC.
Oh.
So I don't know what, but then I lived in Vancouver for so long, so I don't know what kind of accent.
And when we first started dating, I was forced to fall asleep to Friends every single night. Oh, I have to hear Friends in order to fall asleep, so I was forced to hear it. Okay, let's go back into the stories now.
Yes. But then going a bit more to what has happened over the weekend, which we haven't even talked about. But in Calgary, from KMBC, there were people saying thank you to Donald Trump, that they owe you one. It was incredible, and it's the Iranian community.
And tomorrow we're going to cover, the entire coverage is going to be about Iran. And then on Wednesday, again, it's Alberta independence.
Yes.
That being said, I think we have a difference of opinion on in Iran, but we'll talk about that tomorrow.
But yes, people were celebrating on the streets all over Canada too, with big Iranian communities saying thank you to Trump, which completely destroys the narrative of the mainstream media in Canada. But they haven't stopped trying to continue with the narrative.
If you could say one thing to Donald Trump right now, what would it be?
Well, thank you so much, Donald Trump. President Donald Trump. We owe you one. It was incredible.
It seems like Donald Trump gets a bad rap from a lot of Canadians. Like if you just picked a random Canadian out of the street, they probably wouldn't have a good impression of him. But everyone here seemed to think differently. Can you explain that?
Yeah, because he's the way for Iranian people to get rid of the Republic. Us by ourselves, we couldn't do that. We needed help, and he did it great. It was great, amazing help.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it was interesting to see an Iranian and an Israel flag together in the background as well. That being said, we're going to get into the Iran issue tomorrow. I think the United States is spread extremely thin right now. They have enough aircraft carriers, enough jets. The big thing is they don't have enough bombs because they're being spread really thin between Ukraine, between China, and between Iran. And people will say, well, they're not at war with China, but they've armed a lot of the island nations to the absolute tits with bombs. And a lot of their manufacturing is focused on arming those countries like Japan, like the Philippines, like Taiwan. I mean, their manufacturing capacity is at its absolute max right now, and I don't think they can go for more than a few weeks when it comes to Iran. So we'll get into it tomorrow, though. Let's keep going with Alberta.
And then you put this story. I will try to clip because there's a segment where I'm talking in the latest video we just published today about the Canadian healthcare system and how maybe being so proud about it doesn't help to make it better, and it's not as good as a lot of Canadians want to think. And you put a story here where I'm going to have to censor a bunch of words because YouTube doesn't like these words. But from Rebel News, quote, as MAID eligibility, so that's medical assistance in dying, eligibility broadens and care gaps widen, a lenient sentence in Ottawa ending case raises questions about ending life on purpose, caregiver burnout, and accountability in a strained healthcare system.
Should we put this in the RUMBLE section or no? Okay, let's put it. And again,
if Sheila Gunreed says it, I think it would be fine. I think it's if the streamer itself says the words. I don't know. We'll figure out if YouTube censors us or not.
Yeah, and I think we talked about Rebel News and Sheila a little bit earlier, but she has been absolutely fantastic, really coming down on the side of independence. And I think she's had a big influence probably on the rest of the Rebel News staff.
How on earth did we get to the state of this country? There was a time in this country when taking someone's life, even out of desperation, was called what it was, homicide. Now it's just house arrest. An Ottawa judge has sentenced a 73-year-old man to 2 years less a day at home for suffocating his husband with an incontinence pad. He pled guilty to manslaughter. The Crown wanted 6 years, but instead he got Netflix and grocery runs. And we're told this is all, according to the judge, very challenging. If we accept that killing someone can be mitigated because care was hard to access, because burnout is a thing, because the system was slow, then we're not just excusing one act, we're lowering the moral floor of the entire country. Because when killing becomes understandable, it doesn't stay exceptional and rare for long.
Yeah, and this is an absolutely insane story.
The death cult.
You can start utilizing the MAID program yourself and use that as the defense in Canada because it's been so accepted widely. If you're homeless, if you have hearing loss, the MAID program is now accessible to you. They want to make it accessible to children after they get them on SSRIs and all kinds of other hormones. Canada is absolutely insane when it comes to MAID. It started out this narrow, now it's broadened this big, and it's become financialized. We're on both ends of the spectrum. They're trying to save money. They're saving money by getting rid of a citizen that's old and not going to access healthcare anymore. They're accessing it on the other end by making that individual donate their organs and blood. If you want the MAID program, you have to sign an organ donation agreement. And the Canadian government is also selling those organs on the international market, which is insane.
And they've completely erased the value of life. Like there isn't even a discussion or a question now if Canada values life or it doesn't. It doesn't. Number one, as we see how they treat their healthcare system, and they still pretend to be very proud of it. And as we're seeing, they treat their own citizens and those that actually need care and help. It's easier to just end them now, and to also excuse the ending of others because mitigation.
Well, Alberta has the MAID program as well, but they're trying to put restrictions on it and mitigate it, which I do appreciate. But once it's its own independent nation, there should be a vote put to the citizens whether they even want to keep that program at all.
Once you stop valuing life, you stop being human, in my opinion.
Well, and
that's what makes you not human.
And this is one of the big complaints about getting rid of religion. Religion has a non-moving moral foundation, which doesn't change over time. Well, when you get rid of religion, it's the federal government that is assigning morals to what's acceptable and not acceptable. And as we've seen, that constantly changes. And then they think,
and it goes in contradiction with each other too.
Yeah.
When it's coming from when morals are coming from the government, and churches are being burnt. And we said all that, and we're not even religious, but we do understand the importance of religion within society.
Yeah, I'm not religious, but I'll tell you this: I'm very highly sympathetical to Christian nationalism and a non-moving moral foundation, which religion actually provides. I think it should be separate than government, but it puts guardrails on the government so it can't go crazy like the Canadian government's gone over the last couple decades. Whether it's bodily autonomy, freedom of movement, or any other
value of life,
canceling bank accounts. I mean, you name it. Opening liquor store, keeping liquor stores open, keeping bars open, but closing churches and arresting preachers. Absolutely insane.
But Jeff Rath here says, and we did speculate about this when we talked about the transfer of LNG from Australia to Canada, or buying. Jeff Rath here says, quote, "Is anyone surprised? Now the Australian LNG purchase makes sense," and says, quote, "Liberal Carney government isn't insane, they're corrupt. Australia LNG shipped to Eastern Canada. Brookfield owns part of that gas plant." And there were rumors going about this, but...
Yeah, and I mean, if you're shipping it all the way across the world, they don't even have an excuse. They have it in their own country. And when something like this comes out, it becomes very transparent of why they're buying it from Australia and that particular company.
And I think this is the interview you've kept referencing this whole stream.
Yeah, this is the interview I've been referencing. This isn't the best clip, but this was the one clip that kind of popped up from the interview. I highly recommend this interview, or even if you just watch a few of the 10-minute segments they've posted individually. This was a fantastic interview, one of the best that I've seen. His particular opinion is different than mine. He thinks Alberta should renegotiate its contract with Canada, but stay part of Canada. He also believes that's not going to happen because the federal government's not going to give up political power. But he was extremely knowledgeable when it comes to economics and what's going to happen with Alberta in the future.
So Rebel News says, quote, Alberta is reaching escape velocity. If you take the Canadian economy numbers and strip out Alberta, Canada falls.
And he's also a longtime friend of Ezra Levant. I think they went to college together.
What is the motive of Andrew in being so resentful over Alberta separatism, but so accommodating of Quebec separatism? What is this cultural sentiment in the East that is so antagonistic? And it's been, there's something in that DNA when you look at these old posters that you see of, back in the middle of the century, is political posters of Alberta being resentful over federal control. I think the big difference now is Alberta is reaching escape velocity. And anybody close to the Canadian economy knows just how bad it's gotten. And that if you take Canadian economic numbers and you strip out Alberta, Canada falls. It's already at the bottom of the OECD. If you take Alberta and you say Alberta without Canada, it is an extraordinary, fast-growing, highly competitive middle power globally. If you take Alberta out of Canada, and Canada no longer has Alberta, and Canada continues to pursue this heavy red tape, extreme bureaucracy, extreme debt. And again, people have to calc the debt on both the provincial and the federal level because of the way we're structured federally. You have a country that can't work mathematically without Alberta funding things.
Well, and that's the thing. What does the federal government once Alberta leaves? I guarantee you what they're going to do is go to BC. It's going to be very interesting because they ceded a lot of power to the Indigenous tribes in BC. So even if they want to exploit BC's natural resources, they're not going to be able to do that like they were with Alberta.
Yes, so now we're got to Canada.
Okay, let's go into a few questions.
Comments.
Sorry. Comments, and we're not a podcast, I know.
Harmony says, I like Jeff Rath, and also says, too many people want to give their opinion when they do not know who they really are. Harmony is very holistic. Those are interesting comments. Tuna says, are any people working on the government job?
Oh, no, continue.
Are any people working on the government job don't want Conservatives or Alberta to be independent since that's risking their jobs? I know that from firsthand experience.
Read that comment one more time. Sorry, slowly.
Any people working in a government job don't want Conservatives or Alberta to be independent since they're risking their jobs. That's what I know from firsthand experience.
Oh, absolutely. Man, I used to work at the art gallery before we were leaving Canada. I had to get a job because I wanted to get a jibby job. And that's one job I could get, and the pay was just absolute crap, but I had to do it. And you could hear the office workers talking all day about how much they hated Trump, how much they hated the Conservatives. That would be, because it was women working in the office, that would be their talk all day long.
Hold on. I'm trying to find, because people are talking to each other. Oh, thank you to everybody that told us the BEF is in Alberta. I actually did know that, but my brain blanked for some reason.
I didn't know that for the longest time until I was looking at the map the other day.
I went there, so I don't know. It's beautiful. I would love to go back. Sean says, always look at what people do over what people say. It wouldn't surprise me that Canadian niceness might be effective in masking intentions. Be blunt, be direct. Just a thought.
Obviously, that's what wokeism is in general. And it's not just in Canada, but it's infected the entire Western globe at this point. And you're really changing the paradigm of the government and adopting a Chinese system. That's obvious at this point. And they're using it through virtue and virtue signaling.
And that is something that really annoyed me about Vancouver, that people there, at least, or the people I would run into, are very two-faced. They're very nice on the surface, and to the outside world they seem very nice, but then when you actually talk to them, they're not nice. It's just an act that they're putting on.
Well, and they're completely unpolitically aware of reality. They just accept whatever the mainstream media is feeding them, especially in Vancouver. I mean, we lived across the street from the art gallery, and for over a year, they had a teepee set up with a bunch of children's shoes there in protest of these children's graves that never actually happened. There's never been a body exhumed. This is obvious. I'm sure Albertans know this at this point because they are politically active and politically aware. But in Vancouver, that was not the case. I worked in multiple bars as security, and when it was Orange Shirt Day, they would just tell you about the children, and I would tell them it's fake, and they'd start yelling in your face about it.
Lemmings. And Non says, hey guys, just got here. The world has gotten even madder. And tomorrow we're going to talk about the world getting mad and going even crazier.
Yeah, so for all of our regular subscribers that used to tune into geopolitics, tomorrow is going to be all about Iran. Almost the whole episode. I've sprinkled a few stories in there that were outside of Iran, but we're going to do each region, but the way each region's kind of reacting to what's going on in Iran.
Mm-hmm. And Jesse says people are going to wind up getting hurt in BC. I think that's when we were talking about the private properties rights being stripped away.
I don't think it's just BC. I think BC is the model they want to bring across all of Canada. They're going to set the precedent in BC and then quickly spread it across the entire nation. And I think it's planned through the federal government, the UN, and First Nations tribes to take away private property rights. This is a huge reason why Alberta needs to separate now. We've talked about a lot about this issue right from when it came up in depth. That's why I know so much about it. But when you talk to somebody about it, they, number one, don't believe it, or they don't think the implications of this are as far reaching as I seem to think it is.
Even property owners within BC don't seem that concerned because they haven't been fully explained what it means and that they're actually losing their private property rights.
Banks are no longer giving mortgages to a lot of the people that are within these districts where they're losing these land rights. And then a lot of people that already own their house say, well, that doesn't affect me. I already own my home. Well, no, you don't, because what happens if you ever want to sell that home? Nobody's going to be able to get a loan to buy that home from you.
It's as if there wasn't a housing crisis and an infrastructure crisis in British Columbia already.
Well, and then there's a question, are you actually allowed to sell a home that you're not actually...
That you're leasing from.
That you don't own the title for the land. Now they're trying to work out a system where you'll stop paying taxes to the federal government for your house, but you'll pay it to the tribes. That's what they're trying to work out in Richmond, which is insane. And I'm sure what they're going to do is, we'll start with lower taxes so people will accept it, and then it's going to expand out.
And Steve Safaro, thank you so much for the $4.99 super chat saying, if Albertan leadership doesn't contact the Trump administration and Scott Presler is great. If you don't know who he is, go follow him on X. He has done a bunch of canvassing and stuff to change the direction of certain counties and certain cities almost within the US, and he's continuing that effort. And right now he's ramping up the effort for the midterms and saying, we really don't have this in the bag. People get up, start doing things for the Republican Party. But continues, so if the Albertan leadership doesn't contact or isn't already in contact with Scott Presler, the effort will be frozen like Nat's Frenchie figurine, which is this one. We have a real
or the one back there.
Or the one back there. We moved that one because that one was too shiny and reflective, so we moved it for this, changed it for that one. But we have a real one as well.
And this one's actually a piggy. The one in front of you is actually a piggy bank.
It's a piggy bank, yeah. It's empty though.
That being said, I know we do get a lot of negative comments once in a while. I wouldn't say a lot, but some, where there's a lot of people that support Alberta independence within Alberta, where if you don't live there,
you shouldn't talk about it.
You shouldn't talk about it. You shouldn't support it. You shouldn't say anything about it. What they don't realize is when Alberta gets its independence, some of the most important figures are going to come from the United States, not to make it the 51st state, but to make Alberta successful. And this is why this independence movement needs to happen now under Trump, because Trump is going to recognize the vote once it happens, even if Carney tries to do some underhanded tricks. There's a ton of conservative politicians and populist politicians within the United States, because the populist movement is strong, that see what's happening in Alberta and really, really do support it. And as the word gets out more and more into American content creators, you're going to see much more support coming from the United States, because the Canadian national media is going to portray Albertans as traitors.
But yes, and I completely agree, Steve. They should, if they're not already in contact with Scott Presler, they should, because especially for the canvassing push right now and for the gathering of signatures, Scott is essentially the best one there is at that. So they should really talk to him.
Well,
he always
was
seems
the
great.
second best. Now he might be the best. Well, Charlie Kirk was the best.
Well, they were working together too.
Yeah. And it's an absolute shame. It's a shame what happened to Charlie Kirk.
Yes,
there.
and what Candace Owens is doing to Erica Kirk. Because he made me watch the thing today. He made me watch her for some reason while we were getting ready for the show. I don't like it. Oh, and Non always lets us know, and I forgot to ask what he's cooking. So he's cooking roast beef, slow cooked all day with
that's my favorite.
with roasted vegetables. The house smells so good. Eventually, when we get money, I do want to buy a slow cooker.
We need a slow cooker for beans and for the roast. And Non always talks about it, and I always love that stuff.
Yes.
Everything I love is in a slow cooker. And if you've never tried slow cooked roast beef and shredded it after and turned it into taco meat with some seasoning, it's the best taco meat you can make.
You're in Mexico.
What's your point?
Well, that's kind of like barbacoa, except barbacoa is done underground. You dig a hole and just put meat in there.
Yeah, but as much as I do like Mexican food, I just have a taste for American Mexican food.
He does.
I love guacamole. I love cheeses.
Wait, I need to tell this story. He's been going to every single grocery store almost trying to look for taco seasoning, which is a Canadian or American thing. And I told him, here in Mexico, we make the taco seasoning. We just make a taco and then season it. That is real taco seasoning. Taco seasoning is not a thing that we use here.
I like the American.
And he keeps getting surprised that it's not in any grocery stores. You can't even get it on Amazon because people don't use that here.
Oh, I absolutely love it. Usually it comes in a little small pack. You can do one serving, but I used to go to Costco in Canada and buy the big thing of taco seasoning. I used to put it on everything.
Well, maybe when we go, I can get you a big bottle.
Oh,
again.
I can probably order it online. We should order.
No, I just said they don't even have it here on Mexican Amazon, so no.
No, Canadian. We can buy it from Canada. Pay the imports.
I'm not paying that much for tacos.
Although Canada puts a tariff on everything they want to export, so.
And Teresa asks, do you think Canada would start a civil war on Alberta if they don't get the majority vote?
No, because Donald Trump.
Or if they get the majority vote.
Yeah, would Canada start a civil war to stop them?
I guess.
Normally they would, but Donald Trump's right there. And that's Alberta's saving grace right now and why they need to have this vote and then have the negotiations that happen after the vote happen really quick while Trump is still in office. Because Trump is going to not only recognize them, but put a lot of pressure on Mark Carney, along with the citizens, along with Jeff Raff and Keith Wilson onto the federal government. It's going to back them into a corner so they're not going to be able to. And one good thing about what's happening with the Canadian federal government is ceding a lot of these rights back to the First Nations tribes. Alberta's going to be able to point to that and say, you've already supported a separatist movement with these First Nations tribes and also the special rights they give to Quebec. So I think Donald Trump is going to play a much bigger role once the signatures get got, number one, but number two, once the vote's actually done. And if you get the 51% that's needed, you're going to need Donald Trump more than ever.
Mm-hmm. And Sean says, I'm surprised the old Roman law, which later was adopted by common law, real property, right of fee, simple ownership is being destroyed. Why 99 years? 99 years max time to hold an estate, not fee, simple.
It's the Chinese system. And that's really what I've been looking at what the UN has been working with the federal government and the First Nations tribes, and they're really trying to get rid of private property in general. But then I'm like, what system are they going to bring in? Because people will revolt. They're trying to bring in the Chinese system. And because people were willing to accept that 99-year lease, this is a way to do it. The federal government can't say you're not going to own any property, but we'll give you a 99-year lease. But if they make an excuse, this is First Nations land, that's a way to sneak that in there. And the way they're able to get First Nations land rights back is through UN law that they're forcing on Canada. Or not even forcing, the provincial and federal governments are just adopting UN law that's giving private property rights basically away.
And Harmony gave you a compliment, said the guy has so much knowledge, then added that me too. So thank you so much. I don't have that much knowledge.
Not really.
And I always say, I know less than I know more. I say it in English, I say it in Spanish. And I always also say, use your own discernment, use your own critical thinking with anything and anyone you watch, official, non-official, independent, journalists, non-journalists, commentators, always have and keep that discernment as a human that you have.
But also,
as well.
Because we do geopolitics and we've been doing it for quite a few years now, I think maybe, I do know a lot, quite a bit now because I know what's going on in the EU, the UK, a lot of other countries.
And how it connects.
And how it connects to Canada. And a lot of people that focus on Canadian politics just do Canadian politics and they don't understand the big picture of what's going on. Something strange is going on with Western society. And Canada was supposed to be at
No
the
extra
forefront of that, and Donald Trump's throwing a monkey wrench into that whole agenda that they have. The New World Order might not go down the way they thought.
Sean says, American accent isn't real. Californian accent, listen for guy up talking toward the end of every sentence, and his vocal fry, it's not strong, but it's Californian. You do have vocal fry.
Well,
I try to get rid of mine. It still comes out sometimes, but I do try to get rid of it when I'm talking. I do it a lot when I'm talking normally, but when I talk to camera, I tried to get rid of it as much as I could, because initially when I was making videos, I used to sound like this a lot. And it took me a while to fully kind of move it out. I still do it, I know. But yeah, you do up talk.
Well, I used to have a real raspy voice.
Yes.
And people couldn't
Very
understand
raspy.
me. So maybe I put the vocal fries so people can understand me, maybe, because I've intentionally had to change my voice to not be so raspy. Because
Yeah, his voice is it used to be raspier.
way
actually.
before you knew me,
Yeah.
like when I was young, it
Why?
was extremely raspy. I don't know. It's just the way I naturally talked.
Hold on. This one's interesting, I think. From my 2 cents says, I work in palliative oncology and the MAID program in Alberta. There's no legal criteria that includes mental health patients or children. Organ donation is not on the application either at this point. I believe in 1 or 2 provinces it was, or they were managing to sneak it in there.
Well, I don't think it's one. I think it's Alberta is much different on their MAID program compared to the rest of the nation. So the experience in the MAID program in Alberta, because we reported it on the last show, that it's very restricted. When you look at BC, BC's extremely unrestricted, and Albertans should be really looking at what's happening in BC for MAID program, legalization of narcotics, firearms rights, private property rights, number 1. Just look at what's happening in BC. What's going to happen if Mark Carney gets a federal government? He's going to cede a lot of power from provinces, put it in the federal government's hands, and start implementing the same kind of policies that are in BC. He's going to start enforcing it on a lot of provinces.
Canadian Spider-Man, hello, says, I'm in BC. Good luck to you. Says, we are in debt almost 200 billion. That is 40,000 of in debt for every man, woman, and child, not including natives, of course. And then also says, BC is broke. We have cut down all our easily accessible trees.
Well, no,
and mismanaged to no end.
I'll say this. BC is in big trouble because of that debt. But if they would actually access their natural resources and actually put contracts and deregulate, they could easily get rid of that debt. But you have a crazy government. Ebby is one of the most crazy premiers, even more crazy than Mark Carney. So you have the federal government, and then you have Ebby working together to absolutely devastate that province. I specifically worked in oil and mining for a long time within BC, and it's just a shame that they don't access those resources more, and they've actually put so much legislation in, they'll never be able to access those resources.
And Canadian Spider-Man also says, I don't understand how the people of Kamloops haven't sued for libel and false allegations on all the proponents of the residential school deaths. And well, because I mean, the amount of money that has been given to those NGOs and to those certain people that are completely behind it and behind the movement is insane. So I think even if they sued, they would lose, unfortunately.
The Liberal government was moving money around through First Nations tribe through this grave scheme, hundreds of billions of dollars just before an election. And I think it was given to the leadership of the First Nations tribe, and then they distributed it as the Liberal Party probably, in my theory, probably moved it around as they needed it so they could win that election. Because you can't spend money openly on a lot of different things. But if you give hundreds of billions of dollars to a First Nations tribe for
a donation
for bodies that were never there.
And Rafa, says, hello, guys. Hello, Rafa. Thank you for being here.
I got to use the restroom one more time.
And that's going to take a while because, again, Guy twisted his ankle this weekend so he can wobble over things, but he can't walk very fast. And he drinks a lot of water. From Canadian Spider-Man, he says, if you claim to support democracy, how can you not support a vote by the people, even if you don't want separation? Exactly. And that is the same thing with information, even. I will say, when you want a knowledgeable citizenry before a vote, for example, but the fact that they're going after information, after creators, after independent journalists, after Rebel News, etc., also just shows their true colors. Canadian Spider-Man says tacos asados. My 2 cents says old Al Pastor, I think you mean. Oh, he got his cane. The old man has his cane now. He was not using it, and I kept saying it's just gonna get worse if you don't take care of it. I feel like a mother.
Okay.
I looked over enough students.
There's my little cane.
Yes.
It's actually not my cane. You brought some more reason you had a cane. Why did you have this cane?
I went to visit family members, and I used to roll my ankles a lot and get it in. My feet were always in it with. I would always have accidents because I was a competitive dancer for a long time.
Irish dancing.
And ballet. And different kinds of dance. So I used to always have some sort of thing going on with ankles and etc. Rafa says, have you already talked about the latest MIGA?
What's that?
Make Iran great again. I'm guessing. We're talking about that tomorrow because today, now so Rafa and everybody else who has followed us and for geopolitics, we're doing that tomorrow. We're talking about Iran.
The entire episode's pretty much about Iran tomorrow. Yeah. So
Drew Mitchell says, I'm from Alberta and I make my own taco seasonings.
Oh,
see?
Well,
I can make it for you. I can read the ingredients and I can just make it with stuff that's already here.
Okay, let's go into a few more stories before everybody tunes out.
Canadian Spider-Man says 10 peso tacos have gone to 15 pesos now. Sad. In certain places. But yes, let's move on to more general Canadian news. Starting with Billboard Chris saying, quote, correct, there's no such thing as a transgender person. There are men and women, boys and girls. Everything else is pretend, and the game of pretend is hurting kids, so we're going to end it.
Well, this is great to see in British Columbia because this is where I believe this happened, but you can be arrested for what was being said.
Yes, 1 BC.
Yeah, you can be arrested for what Billboard Chris is saying here and what a lot of these people are saying here within BC. I personally know people that have been arrested for different speech laws within BC. So it takes a lot of balls to actually do these. And we used to actually work with Billboard Chris. That's why I profile him a lot. And it's very important, the work that he does do.
More than 600 people showing up to a town hall in Vancouver held by 1BC's Dallas Brody, headlined by Chris Elston, known online as Billboard Chris.
So what do you think about this?
Who's gained attention for his activism against gender-affirming care for children.
And that, go back to Chris there. Okay. And that's the corner Chris always stands on.
Yes, it's on the subway exit from Pacific Center.
They banned him from standing in front of the art gallery where he originally used to stand because they assaulted him and then filed charges on him.
It's Granville and Georgia?
Yeah, Granville and Georgia.
I'm starting to forget the street names now.
Whose bodies are being mutilated and their normal progression through puberty is being denied to them through puberty-blocking drugs.
The town hall was billed as an opportunity for people to speak about parental rights, school curriculums, and gender ideology. But 1BC leader Dallas Brody and Elston's ideologies extend past not believing children can consent to transitioning. They say they don't believe transgender people exist at all.
So first of all, there's no such thing as a transgender person. There are men and women, boys and girls.
I'm standing right here. I'm right here.
Elle is a local teacher, and she came to protest the town hall. She says a lot of
There's mental illnesses.
And you see more and more of this in Calgary as well, which is if you don't nip it in the bud right away, it gets way out of control what happened in Vancouver, and then all kinds of laws are implemented so you can't even say anything about it. So the fact that Chris is able to even say something here,
trans rhetoric is based in conspiracy.
I think it blows my mind as to what they think is happening in classrooms. Because the simple fact is that if we look at SOGI, for example, what that is just teaching students that there are people who maybe are a little bit different.
The anti-SOGI ideology being discussed in the town hall by hundreds of people worried those protesting.
So SOGI stands for Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity 1, 2, 3, which they teach in classrooms in British Columbia.
It's a sexualization of children is what it is.
And indoctrination, the putting in ideology 24/7.
And you have to realize a lot of this ideology here is adopted by the federal government, especially Mark Carney, because of his children and his views on this. If he has an opportunity to push this as national law across Canada, he's going to do it. And this is just another reason for Alberta to vote for separation or independence, sorry.
It gives them space to continue to gain legitimacy. They get to manufacture consent or whatever their hatreds are.
Go to the next story there.
Mental illness.
And I think Pierre Poilievre is next, actually.
From Mark Nixon, quote, Pierre Poilievre disclosed he did not talk to Trump or any other U.S. counterpart because he puts the country first. This is the future Prime Minister of Canada.
And I think Mark Nixon has a little bit too much hope in Pierre Poilievre. That being said, God, let's watch the clip and then we'll comment on it.
Have you considered at all going to Washington? I know you're off to, London and Berlin over the next couple of days. Why not Washington? Isn't Washington where we've got to be doing the talking right now?
I've always believed in the rule of one prime minister at a time. And what I wanted to allow was for the government of the day to have enough room to operate and negotiate on behalf of Canada. And I never wanted our country to be divided. And I didn't want any, foreign regime of any kind to say, look, we've got two different powers coming to negotiate, and I'm going to play one off the other. So that's the reason why I've left that space to our the governing prime ministers. It's been Trudeau and Carney. I told Prime Minister Carney that if there's anyone he wants me to meet with, I'd be happy to do it. And at the appropriate time, I will do that. And he did express some openness to it. But we've got to make sure that we put the country first.
Has the White House invited you to come down?
I don't think I've ever received any formal invitation to go down to the White House, no.
What do you think of Donald Trump? And I ask that, as you well know, and you've referred to it, as many Canadians are, they're more than just angry with him. They don't trust him. They think,
And it's up to Pierre Poilievre to change the paradigm on Donald Trump and the relationship with the United States. And Orange Man bad, I understand there's so much propaganda within Canada, but as long as you're going to say Orange Man bad, we need to diversify our economy, you're basically saying the same thing Mark Carney is with a couple of caveats. What he's trying to do is change the paradigm, saying, well, it's not my place to go down to the United States, and we shouldn't have a snap election until we have a tariff agreement. That's what he wants to try to build out because Mark Carney's so ahead in the polls right now. I don't think Mark Carney cares about any of that. I think a snap election is going to be called, but...
A lot of things about him, words I won't repeat here. What do you think of him?
Look, I can't stand his talk about 51st state. I don't like his tariffs. I don't like the way he's treated my country, bluntly speaking. And various times I've been upset by the words he utters and the things he does, just like everyone else. But as I age, I become more stoic in focusing on what I can control. And Mark Carney actually said something that I think is quite wise. He said, nobody can control what President Trump does. So we have to focus on what we can control. And that means strengthening ourselves here at home so that we have unbreakable leverage when we negotiate with him or his successors. Prime Minister Harper had a lot of wisdom.
So we have unbreakable leverage. You have no leverage. And Mexico has very little leverage as well. But when you look at the relationship between Mexico and the United States, Claudia Sheinbaum's very left-leaning. She's very ideological. She talks a lot of crap on Trump publicly. Trump lets her do that because behind the scenes, economically, she's completely cooperating with him, and it's actually building the economic future of Mexico. 1 out of every $4 the United States is clawing back from its trade war with China. It's now investing in Mexico because of the economic cooperation. They took the opposite strategy of Canada, and it's up to Pierre Poilievre to point things out like that. Instead, he seems to be just agreeing with Carney. And we have another clip after this, I think, where the liberal media actually likes what Pierre Poilievre is saying because he's just really agreeing with Carney here.
Yeah, he's just giving the same talking points Carney's giving, and people should learn to see that.
And I understand he has good common sense policies, but he's not going to win an election like this.
And it's not going to be enough. Again, I will continue to say that.
They said we cannot focus on how the United States makes us feel. We have to focus on what we have to do to adapt. And that's my focus.
And what I think his position
adapt would be to continue to have the U.S. as your #1 trading partner, but you don't want to do that.
Well, I know it's extremely risky position, but he should say we need to come honest with the Canadian people. We've been tariffing the United States for decades. Trump keeps saying this. If Poilievre comes out and says we've been tariffing the United States for decades and now they're finally doing it back, maybe we need to change the agreement. It would get a lot of respect from Trump because it's what Trump's been saying and it's 100% true. And it would maybe set the table for some actual real negotiations. Even a bad trade deal with the United States is going to be a good trade deal and is going to benefit Canada immensely. The diversification of the Canadian economy is just not going to happen like is being promised. They already have 50 trade agreements with other nations. They're already diversified. That's the issue that's going on.
And I really don't know. I fully just don't understand his strategy. Yes, most Canadians don't like Donald Trump, but at the same time, he sounds exactly like he's just working for Mark Carney, doing the exact same talking point.
Well, and liberals are starting to notice that, and that's why they're starting to actually heap a little bit of praise on Pierre Poilievre, because it's hard for...
That shouldn't be a badge of honor for him.
Pierre Poilievre has put himself in a position where he thinks he has to be against Trump, and that kind of puts him in the Carney camp. And then he has the same exact policy of, well, we need to diversify our economy and focus on what we can do. That's exactly what Mark Carney is saying.
And moving away from the U.S. But yes, apparently
he should just focus on what Mexico has been doing and compare and contrast that to Mark Carney.
So Ivano says, quote, there's an unexpected shift on CTV's coverage of Pierre Poilievre.
Finally, Mr. Poilievre is addressing this issue and taking the same side as Canada and Canadians overwhelmingly when it comes to Trump, and acknowledging that Trump...
That's not a good thing. That's not a badge of honor to praise upon him.
Well, and this
is for anybody that is actually conservative.
And this is the issue with Poilievre. Poilievre used to capture the idea of nationalism and what national pride was. Carney has stolen that, turned nationalism into socialism, and said, if you're Canadian, you have to be...
I went out.
Oh, you went out.
We'll continue watching the video.
is being hostile.
Wait a minute. Did Scotty Soyboy just praise Pierre Poilievre? All right, guys. Now I'm convinced that we're on the brink of World War III. Welcome to Society Unveiled, where exposing the left is my #1 priority. Today, we're going to watch CTV News do a complete and total 180 in favor of Pierre Poilievre. They expressed doubts in Mark Carney and even discussed the prospect of Pierre being a more viable option to deal with Trump. Hit like on the video if you're ready to expose some leftards. Subscribe to my channel and hit the bell for notifications so you never miss an upload.
And pivoting from his speech to the Conservative Convention last month, Poilievre this week using his strongest language to date to take aim at U.S. President Donald Trump directly. What is the strategy behind delivering this kind of speech specifically and now?
Well, I think it's the big topic of the world. It's not only the big topic of Canada or big topic of North America. I think Pierre Poilievre, people have wondered what's his strategy coming out of the disappointment of the last election campaign. Well, and I think the speech, I think hit all the right points in terms of repositioning himself coming out of the last, year of disappointment to be
repositioning himself toward being more liberal. I'm back. Hello. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, I keep making you go up and down and your foot.
Yeah, it's okay.
Your ankle.
It's worth it.
Seen as really an alternative prime minister to Prime Minister Carney. And I think, his message was very strong about where Canada should go, not just complain about Donald Trump, but really reorganize ourselves and position to global markets. The question, frankly, is credibility. And liberals will say Mark Carney has better credibility because of his resume and his support. And conservatives will say, well, he's been prime minister for a year. We've heard a lot. We haven't seen a lot. And a year from now, if that's still the case, then I think Pierre will have a strong argument for his credibility to say it's time for change.
So why the sudden narrative shift? It's not like Poilievre hasn't already gone on record to condemn Donald Trump. I know it's been a rough year under Carney so far, but did these media maggots forget what Pierre said during his election campaign?
Common sense conservatives condemn President Trump's massive, unjust, and unjustified tariffs, which will damage both American and Canadian economies. There is no justification whatsoever for these tariffs or this treatment. Canada will never be the 51st state.
Okay, and leave it there. And yeah, there's no justification for the tariffs, but there is because Canada has been doing that literally for decades before the United States did it back. And this is the issue. They need to come clean with the Canadian public and talk about what the relationship with the United States has actually been based upon, because Donald Trump tries to say it, but it just doesn't get through to the Canadian people. Mark Carney has been lying to the Canadian people saying Trump's trying to tariff us for no reason. That's not the case.
But apparently there's also a change or shift, because from Table Salt, quote, Pierre Poilievre has offered to go to Washington to meet with negotiators and present his case for trade with Canada.
And
here it is. Poilievre says he's offered to go to the U.S. to make Canada's case.
Well, and then he's saying,
but he's saying the same things that Carney's
but
doing.
He just said
what good would that do?
He just said in the interview, Mark Carney is open to sending me to Washington. Well, you're just starting to turn into one of his lackeys at this point. At least when Jamal Giovanni went down there, he just did it on his own. He didn't wait for permission to do it.
And he had to fight hard for the backlash after that.
And
too.
maybe we do need to talk about the elephant in the room. A lot of people might not know about this. Pierre Poilievre generally has bad relationships with the Trump family. Donald Trump Jr. really did like Pierre Poilievre, and they wanted to support him and put support behind him. He refused to go down to Mar-a-Lago to meet with them before. Also, he refused to do interviews and a few other things, and some comments came out that he said of them. So they generally don't like him. So there's work to do if Pierre Poilievre even wants to repair that relationship. It's well known that the Trump family actually did like Poilievre and wanted to put support behind him, and he kind of gave him the cold shoulder. And it's coming back to bite him now.
But it does seem that more and more countries are realizing just facts and the truth from the official record. Quote, Japan says no to CUSMA, no manufacturing in Canada. Why would anyone invest in making anything in Canada if there might not be free trade? Why is Liberal government and media insulting the U.S. and their president nonstop?
Okay, just read the headline there.
CUSMA, a critical condition for increased Japanese auto manufacturing in Canada, says the ambassador.
So what's happening here is countries typically would use Canada and Mexico to avoid tariffs because of the CUSMA agreement. So they would, for instance, China manufactures 90% of the product in China, ships it to Mexico, finishes off the last 10% in Mexico, and then ships it to the United States to avoid the tariff. What it looks like Donald Trump is willing to renegotiate the CUSMA agreement with Mexico right now, and they're currently working on that. It doesn't look like Canada is going to get that agreement. It may go sideways, and if that happens, Japan's saying we're going to pull our auto manufacturing of Toyota out of the country, which is going to have a huge impact. Most of these impacts with the CUSMA agreement is going to focus and fall on Ottawa's economy, because that's where the manufacturing economy of Canada is. Western Canada is the natural resource economy. So that's BC, Alberta, and Saskatchewan. And it affects that to some degree, but not like it's going to absolutely hollow out the Ontario economy.
And also,
especially when Danielle Smith and Alberta does have good trading relationships with the United States, so they can carve out special agreements when it comes to oil and other things, especially with what's happening with Iran now. Oil prices are starting to go through the roof. This is going to benefit Danielle Smith immensely. She needs to make sure all the trade agreements are in alignment with Donald Trump outside of the federal government, because Mark Carney doesn't seem to know how to negotiate at this point.
Because, as Anti-Boomer says here, quote, remember when Japan and Germany came to Canada and begged for LNG? Trudeau told them to go away, likely under the guidance of his economic advisor, Mark Carney. Now no one wants to come to Canada. Instead, Carney travels to countries like China and India who interfere with politics and has to beg them for an investment.
Yeah, Japan only has their auto plants within Canada specifically to avoid the tariff. Would they keep a size down manufacturing plant in Canada? Yeah, probably, if Canada would have done a deal with them for LNG and oil when they came and basically begged for it. It was all over the international news.
And now Canada is importing LNG from Australia to benefit Mark Carney's Brookfield Asset Management, allegedly.
Absolutely. And they want to diversify their economy, but their big trading chip with these other economies is their oil, natural gas, and they don't want to access this because of their green liberal ideology. They restrict what they can even do within their own country.
Because, from True Science, quote, we now have satellites monitoring carbon dioxide surface flux. Result, Canada is a net carbon sink and does not add carbon dioxide permanently to the atmosphere. So money spent on emissions reductions is wasted. Essentially, we should all get a rebate for the carbon tax.
Yeah, just go back to that for a moment. I actually thought this was one of the biggest stories of the day. And when I talk politics with a lot of people, and this is a stat that I'm going to continuously bring up because Canada is responsible for the architecture of carbon credits of this new green economy that's supposed to happen. But Canada is the one country that shouldn't have to have carbon credits. It's already a net positive for the environment because of its landmass and the amount of trees that it has. One thing that they will say is, oh, we have forest fires. Yeah, you mismanage your forest on purpose so you can say that you're a carbon negative at certain times of years.
Just so you can create a carbon credit system and then have companies like Brookfield Asset Management sell them back to companies.
Yeah, and it's Mark Carney that kind of was one of the big architects for how the new economic system was supposed to work with carbon credits and the environment and a lot of other things.
Mm-hmm. And Carney has also been flip-flopping a lot lately. Let's remember when he said that China was the biggest threat to Canada, and then he went to China and partnered with them. But also now with the recent events over the weekend, he has also flipped on this.
And after this article, we'll go into some comments.
Post. From Northern Perspective, quote, Carney flips on Trump. Mark Carney and the media warned that President Trump posed a threat to Canada. Now he's publicly backing the U.S. and Israeli military action against Iran. So which one is it? A danger to global stability or a strategic partner when it suits Ottawa?
Well, and
or when the going gets going.
And the big thing here was Mark Carney came out almost immediately and backed Trump's play because of the trade agreement. The thing with Carney is he typically doesn't like to back Israel in any way, shape, or form. So the fact that he did here, there's a lot of pressure on Carney right now coming from a lot of different sides because he prefers to play to the Muslim voter base in Canada whenever he can.
So here's the poll from Politico. Look how much Canadians hate the United States now. It's not just about the trade war. Nearly half of America's neighbors to the north now think the U.S. is a bigger threat to world peace than Russia. Here's a section of that poll, and Canada is in the top left. Nearly half of Canadians who took part in this poll said that the United States is a bigger threat to world security than Russia and China.
Okay, so the biggest two threats by this poll are the United States and Russia. Well, who's sandwiched between those two countries? Canada, Russia to its north, the largest unprotected border, which they're funding the Ukraine war more than any other country in the world per capita. And then they have the U.S. to their south. Why don't they just learn to have good trade relationships with the U.S.? Then you won't have a threat there.
China combined, folks, combined. Now, it's interesting because you would think that Mark Carney talking to his buddies in these other countries, you would think that they would be aligned, right? Well, turns out that it's only Canada that feels this way. Germany, only 19% think that the U.S. is a bigger threat. Not surprisingly, they show that the...
Also, really super aside, but if you know anything about the entertainment industry right now, there's the Berlin Film Festival going on, and the questions the journalists have been asking these celebrities and saying, how do you feel about the rise of fascism in Britain and America? That is completely insane to me. If you haven't seen it, I think Disparu, D-I-S-P-A-R-U, has a good video about the insanity of these German journalists trying to ask celebrities about their opinions about the rise of fascism in their countries. That is insane.
Well,
so that 19% is also insane.
Well, also, you have to look at this. What this says is a lot about the media in these countries. The EU wants to project a wider war with Russia. That's why they want to keep it going until after Donald Trump's in office so they can make that World War III. There's $74 trillion sitting there in the EU's eyes. I don't want to see an escalated war there, but that's why the EU sees Russia as the number one threat, and their media portrays that. I watch a ton of EU and UK media, and it's always Russia derangement syndrome, where Canadian media is always focused on Donald Trump. Why? Because that's what Mark Carney needs to win elections, because he doesn't know how to actually manage the economy. Okay,
the country.
You can leave it there.
Okay.
And let's go into some comments if we do.
Okay.
And let's try to wake up a little bit. I had some of your energy drink.
I'm awake. I just yelled about the Berlin Film Festival. Canadian man, and I think this was a response to the whole, could there be a civil war between Canada and Alberta? Canadian Spider-Man says, good luck. You think having a bunch of Ontarians and New Brunswickers fight Albertans? Good luck.
Well, and it's like... you can't even call them Ontarians and New Brunswickers anymore. They're primarily flooded from immigration from other countries, and they're trying to keep their population up so when censuses are done, they can get even more power. So they love to flood Ottawa with even more immigrants.
And then Canadian Spider-Man also says, as a student of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, Canadian, essentially Constitution, we do not have any property rights. That is why we need Alberta to be free or move to the US. Be free, I would say.
And I have a huge problem with what's it called? Not the Canadian
Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
Charter of Rights and Freedoms in Canada.
He forgets things.
Well, I was so educated in American politics for a long time. I assumed that the Charter of Rights and Freedoms was a solid document, just like the American Constitution. That's not the case. There's the notwithstanding clause, and then they can take your rights at any time that they want. You don't have freedom of speech in Canada because you put contradicting laws like hate speech into effect, and they just supersede a lot of those rights.
And it's ever-changing, essentially. And Canadian Man also says, too many people in BC love free stuff. They cannot get the workers. People in BC are, I would say, one of the most lemmingy provinces of Canada.
There's a lot
At least not northern BC, not the eastern part of BC, but the cities are insane.
Yeah, well, don't just because you live in Alberta, don't think it can't happen to Alberta. I mean, it's starting to happen to Calgary. Not that it has completely, but you're seeing the importation of a lot of immigrants to these cities like Calgary. A lot of females coming to Calgary because they don't want to live rurally, and the vote is changing in Calgary. And then what happens is the cities have the majority of the vote, and they supersede the countryside and the rural vote because they have such a densely packed population. And that's what happens in BC. A lot of BC isn't woke. Northern BC isn't woke. The interior isn't woke. You have Victoria and you have Vancouver, but it's so densely populated. They have an outweighted vote that they decide what happens in the rest of the province. And that's why
immigration.
And that's why when Keith Wilson talks about the country's too big. I almost think some of the provinces are too big because most of BC doesn't agree with Vancouver and
with the
Victoria.
crazy people. My 2 cents says, arrested for speaking the truth about biology since the beginning of time. It's beyond insane, exactly. And also says, homeschooling is gaining ground, so it should be. And I'm a huge proponent of homeschooling. I continue to advocate for it. I continue to research into it, look into it, into just child rearing and bearing in general. And I also continuously will continue to talk about population collapse and the factors affecting it. So.
Yeah, I'd be very concerned of what's going to happen after Donald Trump. If you don't have a conservative president that's going to continue the plan, say a Gavin Newsom gets in there, you're going to see the rest of the West make up for lost time. And I ponder things in my spare time. And I was like, well, how are they going to do it? It's like, well, it's pretty easy. They're going to engage that war with Russia in the EU, send all the young men off to fight that war where they implement all these crazy policies to even more of an extreme. When these young men come back from the war, a lot of them are going to be depopulated. So you're going to have a much smaller amount of people coming back that would normally push against this stuff. And you're going to have a lot of broken men that just don't have the ability to push back anymore. And that's how you get this new society implemented, the brave new world. How do you implement these woke policies when nobody wants them? Well, you send all the people that don't want it off to war. And then when they come back, what do you have? A woke society that you implemented.
That has already been feminized and that has been managed by mostly women. From Steve Safaro, he says, no, it's always orange man bad. Otherwise get demonetized, unsupported, or bottles thrown at your car with a Trump sticker. Restore Britain will change that. And we have been talking about Restore Britain
and I'm glad
Rupert Lowe. Yeah.
I'm glad Steve Safaro said that because a lot of people are still under the impression Reform UK is the party to vote for, and it's not. It's Restore Britain. Reform UK has compromised a lot of their first principles. They kicked Rupert.
Very similar to the
They
Conservative
kicked
Party.
Rupert Lowe out of the party for stating obvious facts. They're trying to make a big tent political organization, and I think it's going to be the end of Reform UK compromising a lot of those principles. I really do like Rupert Lowe and that new party that he's making.
Roland Chapin says, Pierre Poilievre has chosen to be an Ottawa Federalist. He is a traitor to Alberta. People do not want me to say that, but it is the truth.
We agree with that here on this channel, and a lot of people don't like when I say it. But I was really on his side, and I gave him a lot of breathing room. And I even say if there's a national election, reluctantly vote for him just so the independence vote can go forward. Because if Mark Carney wins a majority, he's going to try to stop that vote from happening. But when Poilievre gave that speech about nationalism, and the Conservative Party is a nationalist party,
Federalist, yeah.
nobody supports independence, and if anybody does, they're not going to be part of the party. That was the end for me for them, and this is why I'm looking more into the Republican Party of Alberta, which used to be the Buffalo Party, which can really put pressure on Poilievre by taking some of his votes and saying, you're going to need to make a coalition even if you win a minority with us.
However, I do kind of agree with my 2 cents here that says Pierre has an obligation to the Constitution and Canadian unity, not separation. The referendum is by the people, for the people, nothing to do with politicians. And in a way, I do think it retains its strength by being by the people, for the people, and as a democratic process. But the problem is when the federal government and federal politicians try to impede it, then that's not democracy. So, I mean, Pierre could stand up in that case, but I don't think he will.
Well, okay, well, here's the thing with that. And this is one thing that got under my skin with Pierre Poilievre is, well, when you lost your seat and you needed a seat, you came to Alberta. You knew the district you were coming to was heavily independence oriented, and they're having tons of rallies. And that was their ideology. That you came there, they gave you a seat, they backed you, and as soon as they asked you to back them, you ran. And that would have been fine if you never came there in the first place begging for their seat. Sorry, Pierre Poilievre pissed me off a little bit. I would still reload, as much as he has pissed me off, I would still reluctantly vote for him just to have the independence vote go forward, because I don't think he would block it.
Oh, now it did the thing again.
Oh, is it done?
I don't know. I'm trying to refresh it.
Well, we're on YouTube here because I play it on my phone.
Are we still there?
We're still here for now.
Okay.
Let's just keep
Maybe
going.
YouTube's getting angry at us.
Oh, there, we're back.
Yes. Steve Safaro says, Rupert Lowe is the linchpin. When Keir Starmer falls, Carney will follow and Pierre will become visible to Rubio.
Yeah, I follow the UK polls really closely for our geopolitics channel. And it's interesting because the Green Party is the party all the leftists are kind of going to in the modern age. They've abandoned the old traditional parties and they're surging in a lot of cities. Reform UK was the party for conservatives and a lot of populist movement. Now the vote's being kind of split between Rupert Lowe's party and Reform UK. But as Reform UK bends more and more of their values, I think they're going to hollow out, and most of those voters are going to either come to Rupert Lowe's party or they're going to have to create a coalition, Reform UK and Rupert Lowe,
which they don't want to do.
Which is I'm somewhat okay with, because Rupert Lowe will keep Reform UK at least a bit more conservative. There's nobody in Canada to pull Poilievre towards the conservative side. That's why he slowly becomes more liberal over time.
Mm-hmm. Roland Chapin says, Pierre has made an enemy out of President Trump. Yes, Guy, you nailed the Don Jr. situation.
Yeah, and he lost on the framing, and that's the issue. He could have framed this in a completely different way. He could have framed it as, yeah, Trump's not the best thing in the world, but he does do good things. He does put his people first, and I have a good relationship with him. And if he would have lost in the short term with that, but if he would have done that, the fact that Carney hadn't got a deal to this point, the Canadian public would have been saying, yeah, we don't like Trump, but at least Poilievre has a good relationship with him. Maybe we should elect him so we can get a deal and vote for the future of Canada. But Poilievre's pigeonholed himself by hating Trump just as much as Carney has.
And Tal says, have a great night, y'all. And thank you so much to Tal for all the comments and for being here. And I also noticed somehow that he has been reposting our lives to his ex. So thank you so much for doing that as well.
That's a big help.
Yes.
And let's read 5 more comments and then we'll go to RU and BLE because you got your show later as well.
My 2 cents says Trudeau told Japan there's no business case for purchasing our oil, basically. Roland Chapin says...
Well, not just Japan. They did that to a lot of countries. A lot of countries come to Canada for their natural resources, basically begging them, and the Canadian government's turning them away rather than actually diversifying their economy by offering something Canada has in spades.
And Roland Chapin says Alberta's economy will triple once we sell to Japan and South Korea and we find a way to sell to Germany. And I mean, all of Europe blocked Russia and said, oh, we're not going to buy oil from them. And then they ended up having to essentially do it anyways.
Alberta's around a $300 billion economy a year. It should be a $3 trillion economy once you diversify your economy and you're on your own 2 feet, and you no longer have regulations dictating how much oil you can drill for, how much natural resources you can access, and who you can sell it to. And then putting a carbon tax on top of that, and then having the federal government taking massive amounts of money out of the pockets. Alberta should be one of the strongest economies in the world once it gains its independence, as long as it can access the coast. And it has multiple plans to do so, whether that's a tariff on BC so they can negotiate access to the coast, or it's the US with a friendly administration. Okay, let's go to...
Hold on. And my 2 cents says, Alberta won't have to fight the East. We will just keep our money, and that will change every single dynamic. And they'll realize what they lost. Hopefully.
Yeah, that would change lots of the dynamics, but you got to make sure you don't build a very similar government to what Canada has, because you're just coming out of that system. Yep. A lot of the people you're going to recruit are going to look at the Canadian system as a model and try to say, oh, we'll adopt the good parts, we'll leave the bad parts.
Leave it all.
You really need to be careful and make sure you have a way that the government self-deregulates. It doesn't become bloated, especially when you have that much money. Alberta's going to have access to a ton of money. What typically happens is the government becomes bloated.
Smaller government. Be actually conservative.
Okay. And if you have one more comment, then we'll go to RUMBL.
Roland Chapin says, yes, Guy, you nailed it. We will rival Texas in 5 to 10 years.
More than rival Texas. Canada won't even do a lot of research to see how much oil is actually in Alberta. I was shocked. I think this was also in the Rebel News interview, saying Alberta has more oil than the entire United States combined.
Okay, but now we are heading over to RUMBLE because I do still have a show in Spanish after this one. So if you speak Spanish, go to Nat en tu idioma. It's linked down below. It starts around in an hour and a half. At
10:30. Yes. We're going to go to RUMBLE. I think we have 4 stories we're going to do over there.
Yes.
Tomorrow's going to be all about Iran on our live, and then Wednesday...
And geopolitics.
And Wednesday, we're back to the Alberta independence movement.
Yes, and the downfall of Canada, I guess, and reasons why to leave Canada.
And if you haven't subscribed, please do so. We're a very small channel and we're really trying to grow.
And also thank you so much for all your comments and for your super chats as well. It's really great to see that. We'll see you over at RUMBLE. Sorry, I always forget not to say goodbye. Go over to RUMBLE. The link is down below as well.
Okay.